Ladies and gentlemen, a warm welcome to the SIEW Energy Insights. The program will be commencing shortly. There are more seats at the front ottomans. You may want to take a seat here. Thank you.
I wanna follow where she goes. I think about her and she knows it. I wanna let it take control. Cause every time that she gets close, yeah, she pulls me in enough to keep me guessing. And maybe I should stop and start confessing. Yeah. Oh, I've been shaking. I love it when you go crazy. You take all my inhibitions. Baby, there's nothing holding me back. You take me places that tear up my reputation, manipulate my decisions. Baby, there's nothing holding me back. There's nothing holding me back. There's nothing holding me back. She says that she's never afraid. Just picture everybody naked. She really doesn't like to wait. Not really into hesitation. Pulls me in enough to keep me guessing. And maybe I should stop and start confessing. Yeah. Oh, I've been shaking. I love it when you go crazy. You take all my inhibitions. Baby, there's nothing holding me back. You take me places that tear up my reputation, manipulate my decisions. Baby, there's nothing holding me back. There's nothing holding me back. Cause if we lost our minds and we took it way too far, I know we'd be alright. I know we would be alright if you were by my side. And we stumbled in the dark, I know we'd be alright. I know we would be alright.
Ladies and gentlemen, a very, very good morning and welcome to the SIEW Energy Insights. We will begin the program shortly. May I invite you to take a seat? We have some seats at the front ottoman as well. We're inviting everybody to join us. Thank you.
Achilles and his gifts, and Spider-Man's control, and Batman with his fist. And clearly I don't see myself upon that list. But she said, where'd you wanna go? How much you wanna risk? I'm not looking for somebody with some superhuman gifts, some superhero, some fairy tale bliss. Just something I can turn to, somebody I can kiss. I want something just like this. Do-do-do, do-do-do, do-do-do. Oh, I want something just like this. Do-do-do, do-do-do, do-do-do. Oh, I want something just like this. I want something just like this. I've been reading books of old, the legends and the myths, the testaments they told, the moon and its eclipse, and Superman unrolls the suit before he lived. But I'm
Hello,
not
everybody.
the kind of person.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the day 3 of SIEW 2023. This morning, we'll begin with SIEW Energy Insights. My name is Ivan, and thank you for having me. SIEW Energy Insight features the latest report launched by the renowned international organizations, where they share the most up-to-date research on the key energy issues. To join the discussion for the day, please scan the QR code on screen to access the Q&A platform. To kickstart today's program, ladies and gentlemen, may we invite on stage Mr. Nyam Shi Chun to deliver his welcome remarks. Mr. Nyam, please.
All right, good morning, everyone, and welcome to SIEW Energy Insights. This is the third day of SIEW. We had very exciting programs on the first 2 days, major speeches by many ministers and industry captains that attended SIEW with clear directions and ambitious plans for the directions going forward. I think there are a few key things that we took away from the last 2 days. One, everybody's firmly committed to a net zero future. There's no doubt about that. We have to get to a net zero future, and we have to work together to get there. I think the second key takeaway for me is that we're not talking so much about what we need to do anymore. I think there's a lot of convergence and agreement on what we need to do, but the discussion is now on how do we do that. And that's where we face a lot of details about how we are supposed to do it. We see the challenges. It could be to do with planning. It could be to do with the physics itself of how technological advancements can take place to enable us to bring about the energy transition. It could be government policies and regulations. But we are getting into the details of the energy transition. And we heard this from policymakers, from industry captains, from academics, from banks, and financial institutions over the last few days. So this is good. This is really a good sign that we're no longer talking about big, bold, ambitious plans far out into the future, but everyone attending SIEW is getting focused on what needs to be done now so that we are ready for the energy transition going forward. So these exciting conversations are taking place, and a big welcome again to the SIEW Energy Insights. This is an opportunity for many of the industry players here, as well as academics, innovators, to share your ideas, share your views, and as I said, with a focus on how we can get to a net zero future and how we can better work together. A big thank you to all our supporters and sponsors. This year we have AirTrunk, NEC Asia, and Shell. We have been strong supporters. And I especially want to thank Ambassador Jonathan Kaplan, the US Ambassador to Singapore, for his strong support on various projects, especially on a US-Singapore collaboration on regional interconnectivity. This comes under the framework of the Indo-Partnership on Economic Framework Agreement, and it was first mooted last year at the first ASEAN-Singapore Clean Energy Summit, which was attended by the US Secretary Jennifer Granholm and our Minister, Mr. Tan See Leng. That came about from that discussion, and I think there have been very good progress on that project. We have Dr. Peter Green here with us today, the Deputy Director from NREL, who will be sharing some of the findings from that study. As I said, this is getting into how we can do this, and I think this is one of the key initiatives that we can put in place in this region to enable the energy transition to take place. We'll be talking a bit more about that. There'll be a panel discussion right after this opening address on regional connectivity and how that can accelerate the energy transition. And we really look forward to listening to many of the other panel members and discussion sessions. I'd like to just mention one panel this time around on how women can play a leadership role in energy transition. It's the first time we're having this panel discussion, and we really look forward to those discussions at that panel today. Once again, welcome to Singapore, to SIEW, and to SIEW Energy Insights. And we really look forward to the discussions that we'll be having later today, and many of the discussions outside of this room as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Miao. May we invite you to remain on stage for the next session. Our first session today is the panel discussion on enhancing regional connectivity. Please join me in welcoming on stage Tuan Muhammad Rashdan bin Muhammad Yusof, Chairman Energy Commission Malaysia, Mr. Rajat Mishra, Director General, Infrastructure Investment Department, Region 1, Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. Ms. Janice Bong, Managing Director, Power and Renewables Capital Infrastructure. Moderate this session is Mr. Anish Dey, Global Head of Energy, Natural Resources and Chemical, KIMPG in India. Over to you, Anish.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And it's really wonderful to be together back at SIEW. I'm so glad to be moderating this real high-powered panel talking about regional interconnections and how to enhance them. In fact, that's the how question, but I think it also comes along with the when question as we go forward. So we're going to keep this interactive. Do send in your questions as well. But I'm going to start with one common question for all panelists. How important are regional interconnections? And I'm going to contextualize this. This is not from a physical question, but a connectivity question, but more from the broader goals of energy security, availability, affordability, sustainability. How important do you see this? We all know it's important, but how important? So, Ms. Niam, we'll start with you.
Well, I strongly believe in regional connectivity. We did this historical look back on Singapore's energy system, part of looking at EMA's 20th anniversary, and was struck by how Singapore's own domestic power system developed. And I think the picture is probably similar across the world. You know, power generation probably started very locally in certain parts of the entire country with single generators, and that provided some power to the people living near the power generator. But it was never very stable, right? Because power generators are machines, and they do break down every now and then. And over time, the decision was to connect many of these generators up across the entire country with grids across the entire country. And that provided a far more stable power system. So countries today are all interconnected with national grids. The same principle applies when we talk about regional connectivity as well. There is no reason why countries can't be interconnected. The same way cities, towns are all interconnected today within the same country. And this helps to enhance the level of energy security across the entire region. From a technical point of view, this is called mutual support. You can share reserves, you can share spinning reserves at any point in time. That helps to reduce the amount of requirements which any one power system operator needs to put in place. But regional connectivity helps to catalyze the development of renewable energy resources all across the entire region. It means that renewable energy resources in another country, where it's far more accessible and far more plentiful, can be tapped on to help other countries decarbonize if they are alternative energy disadvantaged. So really, from an economic point of view, from a social point of view, from a security point of view, it's a win for regional connectivity.
It's a win for everyone.
Yes.
Mr. Rashtan, to your comments.
Sure, I'll just add on to Shi Chun's excellent points. From a Malaysian context, I want to talk about affordability and efficiency. So what interconnects can do is that it can really help the people of the various interconnected nations have a more affordable system. So let me explain that from our context. We have a reserve margin currently of close to 50%. Now, obviously, from a stability, that's excellent, but someone has to pay for that.
Right.
And that's a lot of money. But now with interconnectivity, then we don't have to have such a high reserve margin anymore. There will be nations, and some of those nations will have an abundance of renewable energy as well. So not only can the reserve margin come down, but the regional reserve margin, as I would say, probably is greener and cleaner as well. And as you know, solar, for example, and even hydro, they are reaching price points that are cheaper than thermal energy. So from an affordability standpoint, it can become much better and therefore more efficient, with each member states having lower reserve margins, but collectively we can support one another. So not only is it more stable, it is also more affordable and efficient.
Efficient to do that. Okay, let's go over to people who actually implement these projects. Keppel Infra, I'm going to go over to Janice Bong and ask her about her views, from a private sector standpoint. How important is it to your own strategies?
From Keppel's viewpoint, especially if we are a local enterprise that's with operations in Singapore, being a small country, we look at decarbonization. How do we help our customers within the local grounds decarbonize? And that's one of our main mission in terms of contributing to the decarbonization world. And Singapore is, as we all know, lack of natural resources. And if you look at the ASEAN neighbors that we have, they have abundance of resources. And why don't we look at how such a connectivity of grid can allow that sharing of resources on a win-win basis? And that includes a lot of investment opportunities for private companies like Keppel to invest in renewables assets upstream, bring it to demand centers that requires this renewables power that people are looking towards decarbonizing their operations.
Right. Let me go over to Rajat now, my good friend from 25 years from the AIIB. So Rajat, from an multilateral development bank standpoint, how are you seeing this? Is this something which is going fast enough? The how question is getting answered for you?
No, thanks. I think a lot has already been said. And just to add to that, it's regional connectivity really brings together markets. Every country is different in terms of resources and consumption markets, and multilaterals have historically worked how to get those markets closer to each other, and it's across the globe. We have seen it in South America, we have seen it in Central Asia, we have seen it in South Asia, Southeast Asia, different type of projects. And it becomes even more important when you're looking at decarbonization, because again, the resources that may be available in one geography, they can be better optimized if they are available to a larger pool of members, and that is how we intend, funding these projects.
Right. So I think all of us are then converging on the point that it all makes sense. It just has to be made to happen. That's the next step. Now, Ms. Niam, last time around SIEW, that 100 megawatt interconnector between Cambodia to Singapore was being actually under active discussion, and I suppose it has made progress. So what have been the kind of lessons from that last 1 year?
Well, that's the Laos, PDL, Thailand, Malaysia, Singapore Power Integration Project. Many of the partners are here today in this room, and it was through that close collaboration between all 4 countries that managed to bring about this project. It's really the first time so many countries in Asia traded power across borders on a sustained basis, right? On a sustained basis. There were many things that needed to be sorted out from the very beginning. We have different systems, we have different communication protocols, we don't actually speak the same language. and things needed to be worked out at the very beginning. But that's the thing about technology, about engineering. Once you've figured it out one time, and you put it down in processes that all system operators can use, that the seller and the buyer can use, it flows. And this has worked out well over the last year. Power has been flowing from Laos to Singapore on a consistent basis throughout the year. Yes, there are weather patterns and so on, and we're figuring those things out. There's some issues with connectivity and so on, but we're figuring those things out too. But that's the whole idea of getting things done. Start small with 100 megawatts. And the ministers discussed this in Bali about 2 months ago and agreed that yes, this is a good initiative and we should expand this. Expand the capacity of this power trading across 4 member states, and more importantly, bring about multilateral trading. So not just unidirectional from one point to another point, but across different countries in different directions. So something that works, something that we tried, and something that works, and something that can grow into something that could be the ASEAN power grid in the future.
Right. And Mr. Ashton, on that, one is to get the physical infrastructure, other part is to get the connectivity-related protocols, and also the contractual infrastructure in place. Eventually, hopefully, power markets will also start playing a role. So how do you see this evolution on the back of the infrastructure?
Right. Okay. So it's true that LTMS is a wonderful platform, and we are happy and proud to be very much a central part of it. We are the M, of course, in LTMS, and whilst it does give that platform, but you mentioned what's ahead, and I think to really have a proper view of energy trading, we do need some form of a common standard when it comes to markets. Here in Singapore, you have a wonderfully established wholesale market. It is very different in Malaysia and other parts of ASEAN. I believe Philippines also has that, but not many have migrated to a full marketplace. So it would, I believe, one area that we need to look at is to have a common regional energy market, and therefore then electrons can flow freely because the market forces would dictate where it should flow, and obviously it should flow commercially. Of course, if you look at the experience, say, in the UK and Europe, and this is something that they've had for some time. That I believe there's 7 interconnects that connect the United Kingdom to Europe. So when it comes to energy, there is no Brexit.
Right.
They are still very much part of Europe. So even though they have divorced themselves from the European Union, but the electrons still flow, there's still a common marketplace, and that's what I mean.
Oh, that's fantastic. Now, we'll stay with the both of you, and then I'll come to the people who put the actual money in. But, there are still some concerns about regulatory hurdles. In fact, there's a question which says that regulatory hurdles for the industry are difficult to navigate, resulting in significant delays or disruptions in deployment. Can regional connectivity help this thing? Or maybe the other way around, actually. Can regulation accelerate the regional connectivity as well? And you can see the question from both ways. Maybe Ms. Niam, you start with you, and then...
Well, for regional connectivity to take place, there are many ingredients that have to be in place. One, you need high-level commitment across governments. I think you can't avoid that. This involves trading for long term across jurisdictions. And you need high-level support. And we have that for LTMS. Ministers have spoken up in support of that. Even our leaders at the ASEAN Summit have spoken up in support of ASEAN regional connectivity. That's one. But two, we need technology to make it happen. Now, transferring electrons from state to state over land, that's no issue. Many countries have done that. Many regions have done that too. We're talking about across seas now, for thousands of kilometers. The technology exists, but we could upgrade that technology and make it more efficient. So that's doable too. The third critical ingredient for any of these projects to take place is that there must be commercial viability for it to be sustainable. There must be a willing seller, a willing buyer, and that model must work. It must recover costs for the seller with a decent profit, and the seller and the buyer must find it worthwhile that the seller can then sell the electricity to somebody who's prepared to pay a price for it. So there must always be a willing seller, a willing buyer for these deals. And the fourth element, of course, is how do we bring all these different parties together? There is risk involved in all these projects. As with all commercial ventures, as with every project in the world, there's always risk. And here, multilateral banks really play a key role in this. They have the experience working with multiple parties across different countries. They understand risk. They can help parties here who are doing this for maybe the first time understand what those risks are. So they play a very critical role in this entire ecosystem. Again, multiple parties, we all have to work together to make this happen.
In fact, we'll go to that question. Just any point on the regulation which you want to add to that?
Well, maybe I'll touch upon Chee Chun mentioned about the highest level of commitment. And I think we do have a platform which is the ASEAN Forum. But this must be I believe the heads of government of each ASEAN member state must commit. Maybe we need to put it in a very strong free trade agreement of some
A
sort.
treaty of some kind.
A treaty of some kind where there will be no restriction of not just energy, but I think, let's face it, we all want renewable energy between these countries so that renewable energy can be freely traded. Just not too long ago, there were bans. There were bans and surely someone like Janice at Keppel will be worried about that, after building this, I don't know, $10 billion interconnect, and then suddenly there's a ban. And no banks will fund Keppel, and they'll probably be quite distressed if that were to happen. So we must avoid all of that. And again, I look to countries who have done it before. Again, you look at Europe, they don't speak one language. They are constantly bickering with one another, but when it comes to energy, they come together.
It does work.
It does work.
It does work.
So
Okay.
we at ASEAN, I believe ASEAN is the right forum. The ministers have agreed. Now maybe we need to take it to the prime ministerial level. All prime ministers, there must be this high-level agreement, as Xi Jinping mentioned.
Political support, but also the instruments to carry that forward into practical implementation.
That is correct. And then, of course, there needs to be credibility between the governments, between the sovereign states, that this will work, that I trust you to supply me at my time of need, and I will do so, vice versa. That inherent trust must be there.
Of course, of course. Rajat, we are not talking of hundreds of megawatts. We're talking of tens of gigawatts in this context to make this happen. And in fact, all the data and the communiques including from G20 point about trebling of renewables by 2030. And of course, this region can do even more possibly because the base is not very high at this point of time. But that needs a lot of investment in interconnectors. How are you helping, or how is AIIB involved in this process? What have been your experiences?
Sure. So probably I'll try to answer it in a broader way of what multilaterals can do to support, and AIB is a part of that. So one is, of course, the quantum of financing. So like all multilaterals, we have various instruments: debt, equity, guarantees, political risk insurance, and so on, which can be used. But also, as was mentioned by previous speakers, we also bring a wealth of experience on how this has been done in other markets. So it could be, for example, in terms of advisory services, how to structure PPAs better, how to do interconnection better, and so on. And ASEAN, the countries are talking to each other. They are, as mentioned, they are very close to working closely and striking agreements. But in many cases, you require somebody to facilitate different governments coming together and sitting on a table. And we have seen that multilaterals playing that role in various geographies, in South Asia, in Central Asia, where they just you have the credibility to get different governments to talk to each other and sort out those issues. That's important. And then the knowledge sharing part, what you have done in one geography, how can it replicate another? How do you make transaction more bankable, so to say? Work with advisors like yourselves and so on to make, let's say, credible PPA. There are multiple jurisdictions involved. All of us know the risk, which law to follow, what will be buyout, termination, so on. There's so many issues. And that is where, again, the knowledge part that resides with multilaterals becomes very important. So it's a comprehensive solution that goes beyond funding. Funding is one part, but if you get the basics right, then funding ceases to be an issue, because we believe that there is enough capital available to, if you have the basic structure right. And so we look at our role as more as facilitators and with funding, but essentially to mobilize broader capital into the sector.
So
thank you.
Honest, knowledgeable, competent broker in the process. Okay. So there's one question for you specifically. Would you be looking at financing subsea cables also if the opportunity comes?
Sure. We are indifferent to technology. So if, as was mentioned, if something is financially feasible, then we don't see a reason why we wouldn't do it.
All right. So taking that question forward, Janice, to you, are you looking as Keppel Infra at all kinds of infrastructure, including the transmission infrastructure, subsea or overland, or is it more around the main generating assets that you are focused on?
Right. So before I answer this question, I wanted to revert back to EMACE's point about really ASEAN Power Grid has been in the talks for a while. And we have seen over the years there are a number of bilateral transactions. Bilateral means between two countries, you do a sale and purchase of electrons. And LTMS is really the first multilateral transaction that has taken place in the recent years. It is successful, however, it's 100 megawatts. Now we are talking about a larger scale, a larger quantity, and very likely over multiple jurisdictions. And so what are some of the building blocks that's really required for large-scale importation of renewable projects? Of course, I agree totally with that the current governments, the regulators in the ASEAN family are all aligned from that political wills perspective, which is a very fundamental starting point. And then, of course, the devil is in the details. You need to look at some of the supportive framework that the governments are having clear guidelines in terms of where are some of the export permitting regulations that need to be changed from exporting countries' perspective. Not forgetting, then we have to look at the grids. From the grid's perspective, in the past, it has always been overhead land transmissions. And increasingly, like we say, today's subsea cable is another way of really transmitting that renewable power from one source country through transiting countries to an importing country. And how do we then deal with the growing demand of ASEAN, coupled with the need to look at whether there's possibility of congestions at various grids, whether there's a need to modernize such grids to ensure a more multilateral, more free electrons flowing through the grid. Back to EC's point about having really that ability to free flow electrons more freely than today, really from a point-to-point source. I'll touch on the subsea cable a bit more. So if you look at all this, right, it really has a lot of challenges ahead. However, the good thing is Keppel as a developer of such renewable projects, we don't just look at a single source of building renewable assets in a particular country. Because if that's the case, then we're not talking about the integration of the grid and connectivity. So when we do, especially look at the Singapore's importation projects, we really look from the generation source all the way right to the gate of Singapore, landing points. And subsea, like I say, is one big topic or big discussions that we have, be it with the regulators, with the cable manufacturers, with downstream customers, with financiers on what's the right risk matrix allocation. And you need to have a right, appropriate risk allocation before even you talk about bankability and financing. Because that will then drive discussions on whether it's bankable at the end. And if it's bankable, what kind of cost are we talking about? Because when the cost is just exorbitant, and same thing, if you know the energy trilemma, right? You have security, you have sustainability, but when the cost is really not affordable, then that project doesn't materialize in any case. So we need to make sure that the cost is being driven to a level that consumers are prepared to pay for it, for the green electrons. And Keppel's role is really in working very closely with our partners upstream, with the regulators upstream, understanding how commercial structures can work around the government frameworks, the government policies in allowing that electrons to really flow from the source country to an import country where there's demand for it.
Okay, thanks. We are pretty much out of time, just the last minute, which I want to use for one question. So we know we have come to the conclusion that even if there are technical issues to be hurdles to be crossed, commercial hurdles to be crossed, everybody agrees that this is a good idea, and we should be at it. If I had to flip that question or issue around and ask you, despite everything being so positive about interconnections, if there's one thing which keeps you worried or keeps you awake, what is that? We'll start with you, Mr. Nyam.
I don't, well, personally, I'm a cup half empty kind of guy, so I'm a pessimist. Absolutely, right? But when it comes to regional connectivity, it's the other way around for me, really. You've seen it works. We have LTMS, and that works. And you know what the true test of the pudding is? That Keppel, after he has done LTMS, is actually still talking about bringing power from Cambodia, from Indonesia. So they've seen that it works. It makes money for Keppel, otherwise they wouldn't be going further into these projects. And these will involve subsea cables. And this is stealing a little bit of thunder from Dr. Peter Green later, but he'll be sharing how it's possible, it can be done to bring power from Vietnam to Singapore, and from other places around ASEAN too. So for a born pessimist, I think this is definitely possible.
Okay, so we are out of time. So with that note of optimism, we'll not pass that question around and bring the session to a close. Thank you so much. This has been enormously informative and engaging. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, a big thank you to all our speakers for the insightful panel discussion. May we invite you back to your seats, please. Thank you. The next session will be on the topic of Singapore-US feasibility study on regional energy connectivity. Please join me in welcoming on stage His Excellency Jonathan Kaplan to deliver his opening remarks. Excellency, please.
Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the SIEW Energy Insights. Before we get started, I'd like to ask everyone to take a moment of silence to remember those lives that were lost in Israel and Gaza as a result of the recent terrorist attacks and ongoing war in the Middle East. Thank you. So first launched in 2016, this event has attracted continued strong interest from the industry to showcase key reports and analyze the energy landscape. Together with our regional and industry partners, we're delighted to pull together another exciting program today to share deep knowledge and perspective to co-create a net zero future powered by innovation and sustainable energy solutions. One doesn't need to look any further than Russia's brutal and unjust invasion of Ukraine to know that energy is critical for peace and security, and that holds true here in ASEAN. So as we delve into discussions and presentations that lie ahead, let us keep in mind the critical role that we all play in steering our energy industry towards a more sustainable, efficient, and resilient future. This event is more than just a convergence of minds. It is a platform for dialogue that can spark transformative change. The global energy landscape is undergoing unprecedented transformations. As we navigate the complex challenges of our time, from climate change to the evolving demands and growing global populations, the importance of sustainable and efficient energy solutions cannot be overstated. Even as we transform our energy sources, we must continue to push boundaries for longer-term energy needs. Today's Energy Insights Conference will provide some glimpses on how we can navigate this rapidly changing energy world. The program will feature discussions on a range of topics from regional energy connectivity, challenges and opportunities for round-the-clock clean energy in Asia Pacific and ASEAN, and the role that artificial intelligence will play in driving sustainability and our urban living. We will also hear from esteemed energy professionals on how women are leading the global energy transition and 8 inventive startups under the Shell Startup Engine will talk about how they will contribute to a net zero future in Singapore and in the world. Our distinguished speakers and panelists have generously dedicated their time to share their expertise, offer unique perspective that promises to enlighten, inspire, and challenge our thinking. Let me take this opportunity to thank our regional energy partners and the industry partners that are here today. I encourage each of you to actively engage in the discussions, network with fellow participants, and take full advantage of the wealth of knowledge that this event offers. Together, we can harness the power of information to pave the way for a more resilient, sustainable, and prosperous future. Let the conversations begin, and may this event be a catalyst for transformative ideas and collaborations. Thank you.
Thank you, Excellency. May we invite you back to your seat. Thank you. Next, ladies and gentlemen, we'll move on to the presentation by National Renewable Energy Laboratory. Please join me in welcoming on stage Dr. Peter Green, Deputy Laboratory Director for Science and Technology, Chief Research Officer, Alliance Senior Vice President, National Renewable Energy Laboratory, NREL. Dr. Green, please.
So, good morning, everyone. I'm delighted to participate in this event, and I'd like to thank the organizers for the invitation. So, I'm going to actually talk about the feasibility of a subsea cable from Singapore to other parts of the ASEAN community. Now, we understand why this is important, right? It's about reducing the greenhouse gas emissions. And yes, there exists a myriad of ways to actually achieve this. But perhaps one of the most important ways to do this is to link power systems from one country, from one region of a country to another, so you can take advantage of resources, typically renewable resources, wind or solar, hydropower, maybe even nuclear in some cases. Now, this is important because this enables you to reduce the amount of reliance on fossil fuels, which means you're also reducing waste as well. And there are also socioeconomic advantages towards doing that. Now, the question comes up then is that if we're going to put a subsea cable from Singapore to another region within the ASEAN countries, is it feasible? And I should point out to you that it's actually being done in Europe in different places. Most recently, there is a North Sea case where you've got a subsea cable from United Kingdom to Denmark being planned, that is one from the United Kingdom to Norway. And that's about over 700 kilometers long. So that's essentially been done. But it's never been done in this region. And so the big question then is, what are some of the hurdles that need to be overcome to be able to do this? And in fact, is there a mechanism? Where does the expertise come from? And so in this regard, I'll share with you the net zero world sort of process. It was launched at the COP26 by the Secretary of Energy and Special Envoy John Kerry. And the idea then is that you have within the United States a series of national laboratories. One I'm coming from, NREL, and there are a number of others. You may have heard of Los Alamos from Oppenheimer, but as an example. But they work on really important problems of global interest and national interest to the US. And so we have a great deal of expertise in buildings, net zero buildings, lots of expertise in industry, industrial processes, grids. There are tens of millions of dollars spent on modernizing the grid within the US. So we have a great deal of experience doing that as well, as that matters. So Net Zero World takes advantage of expertise across, world-leading expertise across 10 national labs. It also takes advantage of the work of various agencies and philanthropies there. Now, what happens is that there are 8 countries currently that are part of Net Zero World. And if you look at the bottom right of that which I'm showing you right now, you see some of the ASEAN countries like Vietnam, Thailand, Singapore, India, from South Asia, certainly there. And the idea is that the labs work with these by providing technical support. And it could mean by support for technologies. How would you essentially implement the use of technologies? How do you modernize the energy system? It provides support in terms of third-party financing, and sometimes the countries themselves finance aspects of it. It's a highly collaborative process, so we're identifying solutions that are relevant to the particular place. And then, of course, there is a policy question, understanding what is the impact on policy when you make certain investment decisions. Now, this project which I'm telling you right now involving Singapore, we look essentially at what are the energy resources, what's sort of the grid, what's the supply and demand like? We're looking at essentially feasibility and socioeconomic advantages behind doing it. So those are 4 areas. And so the first question to ask is, what's the feasibility of this? And in that sense, I discussed the benefits. I won't spend too much time on this, but of course I mentioned the cost savings, certainly resource adequacy and what have you. But the big question is the risk. And this region of the world is unique compared to Europe. And so the big questions involve, are there, as you pull the subsea cable across from one country to another, are there oil and gas wells? Is there seismic activity that may impact a line that's there? What depth should this thing be buried? Is there fishing activity? Are there ecological reserves, parks, and reefs under there? All of these things are being considered. And so the analysis done by the national labs, mostly a Pacific Northwestern National Laboratory, is to look at all of these potential threats and think about ways to mitigate them. And in fact, let's see where we are. So the cost of this, so this is feasible from the mitigation studies, and quite frankly, what we see the cost is for 500 kilometers about $1.2 billion, for 2,000 kilometers is about 4 billion Singapore dollars. And so the takeaway from this is, 1, it's feasible. 2, the hazards can be mitigated, most certainly. The costs are actually not unreasonable. And indeed, there is also a workforce advantage of creating lots of jobs, thousands of jobs for people to enable this thing to work long term. So with this, let me thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Green. Please remain on stage for the next session. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming on stage Dr. Kenneth Vincent, Director of Office at Asian Affairs, Department of Energy, United States of America. Moderating this session is Mike Hayes, Climate Change and Decarbonization Leader, Global Head of Renewable Energy, KPMG International. Mr. Hayes, over to you.
Good morning, everybody. I've been involved in the renewable energy industry since the late 1990s, at a time when we started to think about whether offshore wind was viable in northwestern Europe. It's amazing to be here today listening to Peter and Kenneth, welcome, about offshore wind being produced in Vietnam and being supplied through overland cables and subsea cables all the way to us here in Singapore. Quite incredible. So I want to dig into some of the points, Peter, that you made in the presentation. And in particular, you had a slide on the risks. And these are risks that exist for subsea cables, but also for offshore wind. Can you delve a little bit more about how we're going to mitigate and overcome some of these risks that you identified?
So the study that was done pointed out that you can actually bury these cables a few meters below the sea floor, and that essentially avoids all potential challenges there over time.
So in other words, the challenges around particularly nature and biodiversity, which is really becoming an important consideration, what you're saying is that the use of subsea cables in effect overcomes.
Right, and you can certainly, there's a lot of flexibility into the cables, so you can avoid certain regions if you need to, certain locations. So yeah, there's a lot of possibilities to do that.
And you spoke about the cost. I think you mentioned a cost figure of 1.5 billion for a cable of 500-600 kilometers.
Right.
Do you see over a period of time that those costs will reduce? Because I keep very close to the world of innovation, and I have people telling me about the power of superconductivity to help transmission through these subsea cables. Do you think in the same way we've experienced with solar PV and the significant cost reductions, can we expect the same with this concept of subsea interconnection?
I would say that, right? We've seen, for example, in PV, one of the reasons you get the cost reductions, apart from just the science advances, there's a manufacturing learning curve that's there. And so the more of these they produce, the cheaper they become. So economies of scale are going to be very important from that regard, and so that's certainly what's happening right now. But we're not going to achieve superconductivity in another 20 years.
but I guess we do have to think long term as well. Like,
yes.
You know, I do work with some. I'm based in northwestern Europe. You and the ambassador and the other speakers made points about what we've learned in Europe. And certainly we're looking to superconductivity as a big long-term solution, which could be a game changer. Kenneth, I want to come over to you and maybe you might tell us a little bit about the role you've been playing in this project, but I also want to pick up on the economic benefits, and it was alluded to in Peter's slides. Again, when I've been pushing the whole offshore wind agenda for many, many years, and I keep talking about not just the emissions and the sort of the helping us get to net zero, but I talk about the supply chain benefits that offshore wind brings, which are quite incredible actually. It's quite different to onshore wind. So maybe you might just give some background on your role in this project and then talk about the economic benefits.
Oh, sure, thank you. The Net Zero World program is our Secretary's flagship initiative for helping countries decarbonize across the world. And this is a unique project in that it's the first one that we've co-sponsored with a partner government, which I think is a testament to the depth and texture of our relationship with Singapore. And I love that it's really getting down into the details. So we're not just talking about load balancing across borders, but we're talking about actually the nuts and bolts of how this would work. But from our perspective, everything that we're doing in the United States at the Department of Energy has a focus on the jobs outcome. Like when our secretary walks into a room and looks at a schematic of a project, first question out of her mouth is always how many jobs. And so I think we've established some capabilities at the labs to assess those kinds of benefits and really roll those in as a core priority of projects. So we're going to be, that's going to be a big part of this project as it moves forward. And
where do you see those economic benefits across the supply chain? So if you take the example of Vietnam all the way to here in Singapore, will the jobs be at the sort of source of generation, or do you see it right across the supply chain?
I think it'll be across the supply chain, but at the source of generation. And I also think it's an opportunity to grow the workforce in partner countries. We've talked to a lot of partners who really want to see workforce training programs and the human development side of it. So I think at the side of generation it'll be huge.
Interesting. By the way, just to remind the audience, feel free to submit questions through the system. I know we don't have mics. So maybe a question to both of you. I mean, it's fantastic this partnership that you've described in your presentation, Peter. Just maybe paint a picture for me about where this is going. Like, do we really see a future where we're going to focus on countries with the capability to produce incredible amounts of renewable energy? Are we going to see this kind of common energy trading system, almost a concept of a super grid across all of the ASEAN region? Are we saying that is now becoming a practical reality? I'll ask you first and turn to Kenneth.
Yes, it is a practical reality. As I explained to you, the costs are not unreasonable, the technology exists, and the resources are not uniformly distributed. So it's in everybody's advantage to find a way to share the resources by and large, because of the cost sharings and I think unrelated workforce development of opportunities.
So from just maybe, and I'll turn to you then, Kenneth, from the perspective of the developers and the project managers who are going to implement these structures, do we think that, and clearly it depends on the revenue line, do you think that these regional interconnection projects make economic sense for these investors and developers?
I think they most certainly do. Yeah, the moment you start sharing resources is important. The grid resilience becomes important. And, as I mentioned, Net Zero World, we're working with some of these countries individually to modernize their grids and to develop very uniform standards across them. And so that's one of a number of things that we're doing at this stage.
Kenneth, are you equally confident about the future?
So let me answer that with two two items. One, I think when you look at the level of renewable penetration that we all would like to see in the ASEAN region, you're going to have to be able to balance load across borders to be able to make it work. So to the extent that interconnection is going to be part of a decarbonization or a decarbonized future, it has to work. But I was grateful for the points made on the prior panel. These projects have to be bankable, and so I do think that there's some pencil sharpening, as we say, in terms of figuring out how to monetize grid services and come up with business models where these assets get paid for, because that's I don't think we've completely solved that yet. So.
Yeah, I guess, and the point has been made a couple of times, you know, and I've experienced it in Northwestern Europe. We started off talking about all of the challenges that you spoke about, but it's happened. We are building these subsea cables. I live in Ireland. We're building cables to the UK, to France. I mean, you spoke about UK to Norway. I mean, it's quite incredible to see. We have a couple of questions from the audience, in fact, generating a lot of interest. I have one particular question, which I didn't prep you on this. Okay. The question of storage, and personally I have an ambition that certainly long duration storage will develop as a technology. How do you see storage and interconnection playing out with each other? Do you think they're complementary, or and I'll put the question maybe to you first of all, Kenneth, are they complementary or are they in competition with each other as technology solutions?
I think they're complementary, and storage is a huge part of this picture. And I'm so glad you teed that up. We have a series of Earthshots at the Department of Energy where we're seeking to bring down the cost of key decarbonization technologies. One of those is the energy storage shot, where we aspire to bring the cost of long duration storage down by 90% by 2030. And so we're working as hard as we can on it because storage is a big part of the story.
No, I was very much, as I said, I didn't prep you, I was very much hoping you would say that, because I've seen lots of commentary about in competition. For me, if you really understand the way energy markets work, you know, storage actually helps the way we trade electricity across borders. So I think, I'm sure you'd agree as well.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And the long duration storage, Earthshot as theory, is an important one. And just to emphasize to the audience, there are labs across the world working on these very similar problems, so you're going to expect progress.
Well, as I said, you know, I started off trying to figure out if offshore wind worked, and look where we are today. So I'm going to turn to getting lots of questions from the audience, but one in particular, and I have, again, this resonates with some experience I've had with not with subsea cables, but with tidal turbines that sat on the seabed. Right. So the question is, what are the thoughts on the protection and maintenance of the subsea cables over long periods of time? And again, that question is important to me because yes, we've put down the subsea cables, they're working in Europe, but it's early days yet. So to what extent, and particularly the research you're doing, have you considered that issue?
So we have quite a bit of experience with subsea cables over a long period of time. The technology is such that burying it, we know, is going to work from our experience and observations across the globe when it's used. What happens sometimes, you may get materials failures which may occur on occasion. That's perhaps where the biggest concern is if you're going to look at something over 25, 30 years, for example. But there are already fixes for that because, quite frankly, if there's a fracture across this, what you can actually do is it can be fixed. And the estimate, quite frankly, is that you simply pull things up and simply reconnect. And it's a downtime, they estimate around months, maybe 6 months, could be longer, depending on how severe it is. And more importantly, it's cheap compared to the cost of the cable. We're looking at millions rather than a billion. Very, very different set of orders of magnitude. Yeah.
And I guess it's a cost that just needs to be factored into the financial model.
It is, absolutely. So in terms of the cost of laying the wire, the cost of just buying the wires, laying them, the fix is cheap, comparatively speaking.
And I just want to make an observation. I sat on various panels and both as a panelist and a moderator yesterday. The theme of collaboration was something that really came through. And I think, and you both touched on this point, we need to learn from each other. We need to learn from the experiences of those who have done the subsea cables. I think the role that the organizations like the National Labs is playing is absolutely critical because, you know, we all have a vested interest in understanding these costs, and I hate the idea, and I don't think it's happening, that people are just holding data to themselves. I think the more we can share and collaborate, it's absolutely essential. want to turn to a very, very topical question that comes up, which is the whole area of critical minerals. And the question is, what are the main drivers of the costs of subsea cables? How sensitive are the cost estimates in the study to the cost of input metals and other materials, for example?
So there is copper, and there's aluminum, which is cheaper, and copper is a lot more resilient. Long term, this is a discussion that comes up very often. Are there going to be critical minerals available? Put it this way: the core of the Earth has far more critical minerals than we'll ever need. That's just a given, right? And we keep finding reserves everywhere. There's also materials discovered. As I'm a material scientist, where there's all kinds of substitutes that we're able to identify using all kinds of machine learning processes. So for me, that is not a major concern. These are still early days, and we're solving them one by one.
And, I think a lot of people probably sat on panels like this in 2005 talking about where is the oil that we need going to come from. I think we're at the front end of a super cycle with critical materials, and there's so much emphasis on partnering to build up that supply chain. And so I think 10 years from now, we're going to be in abundance.
Well, I have to say, both of you are the most confident speakers on critical minerals.
I'm a glass half full guy.
I had to emphasize that point.
I thought you were going to tell us we had to go to the moon or Mars to get some critical minerals. But
yeah, no, I really have to emphasize that point.
I think you made a really important point, Peter. There is a lot of innovation going on around substitute materials and minerals.
Yes.
And I have to say, I'm really excited by that. Yes. We're running out of time very quickly. I want to come back to a fairly fundamental question relevant to the audience here. I mean, we're talking about Vietnam, and I've been involved in particularly the offshore wind industry in Vietnam. But why does it need to be so far away? Is there not closer resources on offshore wind to actually supply renewable energy to Singapore? And clearly we're close to a huge sea area. Like, why does it need to be so far away?
This is where I think about this, is that if you're going to put an offshore wind site, you have to make sure the wind resources actually are appropriate, first off. And two, there are all kinds of political sort of challenges associated with placing them. The people in those areas have to agree that this is a good place for this. So there's so many things out there. But then, technologically, you can put an offshore wind farm miles and miles out, and it's able to supply wind to cities nearby. Yeah, so.
And in some ways, I think my own view is that the market will solve for this, ultimately, because you have to look at the cost of longer interconnection with probably the lower wind speeds in places that are closer. It's a trade-off, ultimately.
And with the wind speed, the nice thing about offshore wind, you can build these wind machines bigger and bigger and bigger. Wind spans up to 150, 300 meters to get a lot of megawatts coming in. And if the wind speeds are low, then you can build them bigger and harness a lot more. So that's a solvable problem. The amount of power that a wind machine puts out is proportional to velocity squared and the radius squared. So those two things you play with when you design things. And so this really isn't the easy people think it is.
And I think also, for a lot of partners, the actual wind resource is so enormous and the ambition is so high that you're going to see some countries build out more wind than they can use. So export markets are just what follows.
Well, just to finish on a personal note for me, I live in Ireland, which is a small country, but actually when you look at our offshore wind resource, it's actually one of the biggest in the world. We will never get close to using all of it, and that's why interconnection, conversion into hydrogen, green ammonia are the long-term solutions. So we're over time. I'm getting warning messages here. I want to just say I'm really enthused by the confidence and the work that's been done on regional interconnection. Yes, there are challenges, but there have always been challenges, and I think I'm delighted to hear very much the optimistic outlook and a very exciting development in the renewable energy industry here in the ASEAN region. So Kenneth and Peter, thank you very much for your contributions. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen, for the insightful discussion. May we invite you back to your seats, please. Thank you. And now, ladies and gentlemen, we'll now proceed to our next session on breaking barriers and igniting change. women leading the global energy transition. Please join me in welcoming on stage Ms. Audra Loh, Chief Executive Officer and Executive Director, Cleanfield Capital. Ms. Mok Pei Pei, Head of Business Development, IHI Asia Pacific. Ms. Jean Cheng, Chief Risk Officer, SP Group. Yolanda Cheng, Head of Sustainability, DBS Bank. Moderating this session is Ms. Violet Chen, Director, Industry Ecosystem Development of Energy Market Authority.
Hi, I'm.
Violet, over to you.
Okay. Hello. Hi, testing. Hi, a very good morning to everybody here for this very exciting discussion. And I really invite all of you to be part of this conversation about women breaking barriers and actually leading the global energy transition. This is really a very important topic right now, especially when recently we all heard of Claudia Golding, who won the Nobel Prize for advancing the world's understanding of women in the labor workforce. And coming to the energy sector, actually there are no lack of reports and data out there, although actually they are quite pessimistic. So I will cite the World Economic Forum. Actually, the energy industry is one of the worst when it comes to women in leadership position. I'm looking at my boss here as well. Sorry. So for every 1 out of every 5 leadership positions is held by women. So it's actually a much lower stats compared to other sectors. And according to the International Energy Agency, IEA, women in general in the energy sector actually earn 19% less in wages compared to the men. And another report by ARENA, International Renewable Energy Agency, the renewable energy sector actually employs about 32% women, but actually most of these jobs may be in administrative roles. So what does it mean for us, for the energy transition? So we are really at an inflection point when countries, companies, we are looking urgently to decarbonize our energy future. We may be looking for a different skill set, different solutions, different way of thinking or working from before. So with this, how do we actually realize between the gap and the aspiration that we want to achieve? So with me, I have 4 very distinguished women leaders, all in their own field. Okay, so I have Pei Pei, I have Audra, I have Jean, Yolanda, yeah, sorry. So let's start off with the big picture in mind. So let's talk about trends, challenges in the energy transition, and how can women leaders actually contribute to this. Maybe we can start with Audra to give us some perspectives. Yeah. Sorry.
All right. Hi, everyone. It's really good to be here. If you think about it, we're living in actually a very exciting time. We're at the cusp of potentially the next industrial revolution. So if you think about what that means in terms of the skill sets that we need, I think it's very natural for people to think it's always STEM related. Yes, for sure, science and technology is going to underpin the transition and progress, but there is actually a multitude of other skill sets that you also need, right? Engineers, definitely, when you want to build the next interconnected grid across ASEAN, when you want to build the next green hydrogen plant, you need engineers for sure, but you also need policy planners. It's like, you also need policy planners, you also need financiers like myself, project developers, we have Janice from this morning. So with that in mind, I don't think there is one single area that we should all start asking our kids to go into in order to pave ourselves for a strong career path in the future. But I think if we want to think about leadership roles, what is really needed in this very complex, very interconnected world is you need people who are well-read, who are well-informed, and to have built up a broad base of experiences and skill sets to be able to give you the ability to see what the next opportunity set is. We also need people who have the ability to motivate and to work well with other people. And these are skills that are generic across both men and women. Of course, women bring with us a slightly different way of doing things, a slightly different way of seeing things, but I do think that you need both men and women's perspective in order to sort of make this world a better place. So how then do we sort of put more women into these types of leadership positions? I think we have to help ourselves. We have to really sort of learn, grow, take advantage, or recognize and take advantage of opportunities to do precisely that, to take on new experiences, and to put yourselves in the intersection of pathways that can lead you to more senior leadership positions. And I think that perhaps women don't quite do that enough. There are a lot of other challenges outside of work life that we need to think about. I do think that we are in the process of sort of seeing that evolve as well. So, and I'm hopeful. In terms of just kind of hiring practices, I'm not a big believer of women-specific hiring practices. In my company, Clifford Capital, 60% of our workforce are women. But more importantly, 50% of the senior roles are actually women. And how did we achieve this statistic? We actually did not have any gender-specific hiring practices, other than the fact that we make sure that when we do have a position open, we start with a pool of both men and women candidates. But from that point on, it's really a selection based on merit. It's based on the suitability of the candidate for the organization that we are. And over time, we've built up a team that has 50% of women leaders. So I think we're very proud of that, and it also is testament to the fact that there is a lot of talent out there amongst women. Again, women, we have to help ourselves, put ourselves in those positions to get these opportunities to learn, and I think that would set us up well to take on more leadership roles in the future, whether it's in energy or anything else that's related to the energy transition.
Just well said.
Yeah.
So we've been talking about women in leadership position. So perhaps at this point I can turn to Jean. You have been with SP Group for 25 years. So having chosen a career in the energy sector, what is your view on this? And what further can organizations do to advance this? Yeah.
Thank you, Violet. First, I want to thank the men for staying back for this session. Well done. And I want to thank CE, Mr. Nyam, for actually highlighting this session, so that must have helped. And really, reflecting on my 25 years, I think one of the things that I would say critical success factors for women in the energy sector, I can summarize it in 5 C's. And the first C is courage. I think women need more courage than men to be able to take up the new challenges, and especially in this energy transition period, I think there are new roles, there are new opportunities whereby women, we can make a difference. The second C is confidence. I think many times women could do the same job or even better than men, but we are just too shy. I think we underestimate our own abilities, and we didn't have the courage and confidence to put up our hand for it. And the third C is commitment. I think this may be a tough one because women, we have to also, especially in the Asian culture, we look after our children. I have 2 kids, but thankfully I have 7 helpers. First, I have a super maid, a super helper. Then I have a husband who does all the chauffeuring, including the marketing. And then I have 2 iPads, 2 iPhones, and that makes it 6, right? And if all things fail, I pray to God, who is the greatest helper. So I think coming back, we need the commitment to succeed in the energy sector. And that's 3 C's. The 4th C is collaboration. We can't do it alone. I think we can, whether men or women, we just need to work as a team to push the boundary and find new solutions, new opportunities. And the last C is we are here today, and that's communication. I think we need to communicate, we need to make known our capabilities, the way that women can contribute. We are different from men, for sure. I believe we have a higher threshold for pain because we have to do childbearing, we have to give birth. I believe that's the greatest pain nature has given us. But seriously, we need to communicate, and we need to be able to come together to find solutions.
Okay, well said, well said. Thank you for reshaping your ideas on what comprises C. Okay, but perhaps we can talk about where exactly, what's the value can women leaders actually bring to the global energy transition. So we have all heard about other speakers talk about the need for innovation, for technology, for new solutions. Perhaps we can revisit, like, what can we bring to the energy ecosystem? How can we actually contribute to increasing its agility and have a spur on the transition? Maybe at this point, I can invite Yolanda to actually comment on this.
Certainly. Well, DBS is known as one of the best employers in the world, and we have a DBS Foundation. We've been giving grants to nurture a number of tech startups. Many of them are in the energy sector. And I've noticed that actually many of the winning enterprises which have got our grants, they have a women entrepreneur, a co-founder, which is something that you don't see much in a corporate setting. I think that has really given us some food for thought. Why is it that in a large corporate, women seem to struggle to get to the senior position, whereas in the startup world, women are showing the innovation, the creativity, and the drive to start a company? And I think for the last 2 days at SIEW, the two dominant themes have been collaboration, have been partnerships, and in fact, women in a lot of the peer review research have shown that we are very good in partnership. But there is also research showing that women work better and can thrive when there is clarity of roles and responsibilities. And I think that is why in a big corporate setting, you may find that women are not in the senior position as we feel as more prevalent as they should be. Because often in a large setting, across organizations and across teams, roles and responsibilities could be blurred. And I think as a result, we as a bank, we have done a lot of financing structured with a KPI, and this is a sustainability-linked fundraising whereby one of the KPIs could be about diversity in senior management positions. So I think to Audra and Jenny's point, whether we want to have women-specific recruitment, actually, some of the times when there is structural biases in companies, women-specific recruitment is equal opportunities employment. And I think for us at DBS, we have the very good women representation in senior management that have served as a great role model for the rest of us, trickle down to the rest of the workforce. The tech startups that we have been nurturing, we are also giving the mentorship to them. So I think this is where we can nurture the pipeline of women entrepreneurs to move up to the top, whether it is their own companies or in a big corporate energy company.
Well said, well said. So let's turn to Pei now, to put you on the spot. So you work in the policy, advocacy, and in the AV industry company. So what is your view on technology, and how can women actually lead the charge in this? Yeah.
Right, thank you, Violet. So I'm from IHI. I think maybe many of you do not know IHI. So IHI is full name is Ishikawa Jima Harima. It's a very old Japanese conglomerate. We're 170 years old this year, and heavy industry, right? So 2 years ago, my current CEO invited me to join the company. I'm no engineer, and I'm like, why do I join this company? And then he said that the one thing of the reasons that he wanted me to join, he said that, look, I needed new perspective, I needed a change, because the company is undergoing a change. So now, that day, it made me realize that, well, if I would like to generalize, I think women, we can make change and influence more effectively. So that's the reason why now I'm here with IHI. So as a woman in energy sector, I think diversity is very important, right? We are the ones who do not conform to the norm, right? And then we need to make sure that we need to make sure that we actually bring in the new perspective into decisions making. So that's very, very important. Like for example, today, like we see, before this it was a totally full house, and now we see there's 2 lines empty here. So, but having said that, I'm glad that to be participate in these panel discussions. So when it comes to diversity for my team, it's still a 90% male. But having said that, I think we do not actually see us as a gender perspective. We actually play our strength and our complementary strength. And I see what women can actually bring into this is actually have an advantage because we can bring a totally different perspective. And how we influence policy is bringing in the additional perspective that is not normally discussed. So I think it's very important for people not to have the stigma, or rather I would say the thought of having a heavy industry must be a very STEM kind of environment. So being a non-STEM, I think we still be able to thrive in this industry because as what mentioned with the fellow panelists here, that there's a lot of collaborations and partnerships that are required, especially when it comes to decarbonizing. So we are no longer back to the old days where the technologies companies are just flexing their muscles on the technologies anymore. I think now we are coming more towards partnerships and collaborations. And with that, I think women plays a very important role here because how we can make sure the partnerships and collaborations works very well. And that's where I think women's, like I mentioned earlier, that in terms of general, we can influence and make a change more effectively. So I think what I see is that women, we just need to speak up and make a change. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay. I'm so inspired. All right, at this point, I have to call to the audience that I have not received any questions yet. So this is very disappointing. Can you all have courage and post us some questions? Because we will be similarly very brave to address any queries you have as well. But maybe turning back to one of the earlier points where we talked about organizational practices spoken by Audra, maybe at this point, can you maybe elaborate more on what do you think that organizations can do in further detail to promote more women in leadership positions?
So I think one of the things that was very welcome by our staff is obviously allowing a lot of flexibility in the workplace. And I think we're not the only ones, right? I think post-COVID, a lot of organizations have gone down this path. But we're really starting to sort of see how people are able to take advantage of that to balance their life outside of the office. And what's very interesting is in my team, I see that the young dads are taking advantage of this, sometimes even more than some of the young moms. And to me, that's actually a very encouraging sign. It's a sign that, we are sort of moving towards a society where there's a lot of shared parenting kind of approach, and where both moms and dads are, spending time making sure that the family is taken care of properly. And that also is important because I think women almost naturally tend to think that they have to take a back seat. When we have a lot of, in Singapore, we have very commonly have we have a lot of dual income households, probably because our cost of living is extremely high. But it's also really good because it's also given a lot of equal opportunities to women. But when we have families, I think there is still a bit of a thinking that, generally women will be the first to step back and take a back seat and let the husbands pursue their career. But honestly, in today's world, the high-flying careers, the promising career opportunities don't just necessarily just go to the men. They also go to the women. And I think you then need to kind of come back home and have that, serious discussion about who's going to potentially give way for the other person or make some space for the other person to progress. And it doesn't necessarily have to be one way all the time. You can kind of take turns and, make it work depending on where you are and what stage of the career that you're at, and honestly, I think it's very case by case, right? No one can say that it's always going to be the husband that's going to be the person that can bring in the most money or can advance the furthest in the career. So I do think that having a flexi work policy, it sounds like a small thing, but actually it starts the change at a very sort of ground-up level. It really opens up sort of different ways of managing your work-life balance and then managing the opportunities that both genders have in front of them in terms from a career perspective.
Thanks. Oh, I have to update that. Thank you for all your support. Now I have an overwhelming questions. Okay, maybe I'll just follow up on organizational practices. So I have this question, which does your company provide leadership mentoring to support female employees in your company to move in this field? So it's about organizational support. So perhaps Jean can have a comment. Yeah.
So we do have mentors, mentee scheme, but we are not gender specific. And I think it's a good thing because women need to be viewed as a person, just equally as men. I think that is the starting point. In fact, I wanted to share about something quite interesting on flexi work arrangements. So like most company in Singapore, especially we follow the good practices in the government sector, which in fact, post-COVID, we continue to have flexi work arrangements, work from home, and so on. And I asked my HR for some statistics. I had expected that, you know, with the continuation of flexi work hours, we practice 3 days in the office, 2 days at home, unless there's work exigencies. I expected women participation, at least in the company, you know, joining SP should increase, but that has not moved the needle. So I think what has actually beyond flexi work hours, and you know, we have various programs, you know, to support working mothers and so on, lactation room, etc. I think it's more the mindset, and then especially for energy sector and SP being engineering company, so I asked for stats of the gender difference or men-women ratio for university cohorts. And actually, I think the problem starts from there, because the number of women joining the engineering faculty is in the 30 over percent. I can't remember, maybe around 35% or so. So, you know, when you start with a smaller crop, naturally, the people who can join, the women that joins the energy sector, and in SP, we have about 24%. Now, I happen to sit on the board of an Australian utility. In fact, I expected Australia to be higher, but actually theirs is 21%. So it is a global problem, all right, this gender diversity. I think, but the good thing is that there's really more awareness. I mean, having this session in SIEW is an awareness, having the first Nobel Prize winner, singularly, going to a woman, and on a subject that's studying on the women labor force, I think that speaks volume. So to me, it is mindset. It is about, you know, women ourselves also wanting to make a choice to actually go for it. And I'm a working mother, I know. It calls for sacrifice. All right, I think if I have spent more time with my children, I wouldn't have to send them to overseas. So whatever more that I earn in my salary goes to their funding their education. But then it's a choice. But I believe that really, inherently, women has the capability. I believe it's the choice of the woman. And of course, you know, as what Aura said, a lot of this is in parenting, men, and increasingly, I think there's awareness, and thanking all the men in the room again. My daughter works for an MNC, and she got 5 months maternity leave. My son-in-law works for a law firm, a foreign law firm. He got 6 months paternity leave. But of course, he took 4 months. He said, "Mom, if I take 6 months, it's career suicidal." But I think this society has begun to actually be more aware and create equality.
I agree with that. Yeah. So, okay, we have time for one last question. Maybe this one is our highest vote, and every panelist can take a chance at doing this. What is the one thing that helped you to be successful as a female leader in the energy industry? Yeah, maybe we can start with Yolanda. Yeah.
Well, in my own experience, I have benefited hugely from mentorship, and I couldn't agree more that it is a mindset change that is required for women to move up to the top. And both my two treasure mentors, one is a man, one is a woman. So I think the mindset change is not just about women becoming more confident and committed and to speak up. The men should also be coached in a way to know that diversity in management or in any corporate setting is a benefit to all.
How about Pepe? Yeah.
Yeah, I think for me, I think in sports or a business, I think diversity is very important. So it's no one person is a striker and a defender at the same time. So probably, like, to answer Jean's earlier mentioned as well, although the statistics shows that engineers are only 30%, but I'm no engineer and I'm still in the heavy industry. So I would say if you think that this is a role for you and what you can do, and this is what your ambition to do, and just do it. So be bold, do not be timid, and go for it.
Great. So I have one last comment. Are there any specific skills that women require to be successful in the energy sector, or it doesn't matter, since we can adapt easily regardless of the obstacles? I will answer this. Yes, definitely. We are versatile, and we have a value add and different skill set to bring to the energy transition. So at this point, just one sentence for every panelist. Give a shout out to the audience to inspire our future female leaders, to inspire our organizational leaders here to bring more in this, do more in this area. So just one sentence from each one. Maybe we can start with Audra. Yeah.
I love the message of having courage. Have courage, everyone. Men, have courage too. Support your spouses. Yeah.
Final last sentence.
Go for it.
Okay. Okay, Yolanda.
Be resilient.
Pei Pei.
You make yourself heard.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, ladies. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give the ladies a round of applause. A very inspiring panel discussion. And that was one of my favorite panel discussion as well. Thank you, ladies. And now, ladies and gentlemen, we'll move on to the session on powering a clean energy future, presented by AirTrunk. Please join me in welcoming on stage Mr. Yosha Schmicks, Head of Energy and Climate for Asia Pacific and Japan Hyperscale Data Center Specialist, AirTrunk. Mr. Giorgio Fortunato, Head of APAC Data Center Energy, Google. Moderating this session is Rina Kuwahata, Energy Analyst, International Energy Agency.
Hello again.
Rina, over to you.
Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. I'm Rena Kuwahata, Energy Analyst for Power System Transformation at the International Energy Agency. I'm happy to moderate this session, this panel discussion today with AirTrunk and Google, titled Powering a Clean Energy Future. Our discussion will focus on the role of energy attribution certificates, like 24/7, to accelerate development of decarbonized electricity in the Asia-Pacific region. There are various electricity procurement options for corporate consumers with global operations like AirTrunk and Google. And the 24/7 procurement approach is seen as a promising way to have a stronger reflection of the time value of generation. And this is important because imagine if you have a flat load profile day and night, and you sign a power purchase agreement with a solar PV power plant that doesn't generate at night. The electricity you consume during the day is clean if it's sunny, but at night, there's no guarantee that it's clean. And this is why a tracking of an hourly generation of the power system and matching the hourly consumption with decarbonized generation is deemed a more accurate tracking approach. And so today, we are going to discuss with Giorgio and Yosha about the benefits and challenges of this procurement approach in the Asia-Pacific region and the key unlocks for enabling a pathway towards this accounting approach. Now I'll invite Giorgio and Yosha to introduce themselves. So, Giorgio?
Thank you very much, Rina, and well, thank you for having me today. It's such a privilege and has been a fantastic conference so far in the last couple of days. So my name is Giorgio. I head the APAC energy team at Google, And so basically in this team, we are responsible for energy procurement for all our data centers, operations, but also more generally to drive decarbonization for Google in our region. So that means also supporting our supply chain. As some of you may know, in 2017, we were the first company to, of this scale at least, to match our yearly demand of electricity 100% with renewable energy. And we have been doing that since 2017. But we wanted to take it a step further. So in 2020, we have introduced new goals, which is by 2030 to procure 24/7 carbon-free energy. What this means is that we aim to procure carbon-free energy every hour of the day for every day of the year in every grid where we operate. And alongside this goal, we have also set a target for 2030 to decarbonize our operations and supply chain. These targets go hand in hand in reality, because once we have progress towards 24/7 CFE, we have also, I mean, this target aims at decarbonizing the grids at scale, and so the benefits of this will reflect in turn in how our suppliers are procuring their electricity for their Scope 2, right? So yeah, overall, interesting times, ambitious targets, our biggest sustainability moonshot yet. And so we're working really, really hard to achieve it. And we are feeling very lucky that we are doing this alongside many partners.
Thank you. Joscha, can you introduce yourself?
Thank you and good morning. My name is Joscha Schmitz. I'm Head of Energy and Climate at AirTrunk. We're a leading data center developer. By way of introduction, the first thing I'd like to say is that we have an exclusive focus on Asia Pacific and Japan as a region. So we develop and operate data centers in Australia, in Singapore, in Malaysia, in Hong Kong, and Japan. We take a very regional view to this, and this is why we're excited to be here today as well. Because, so the second point, we build very large-scale, energy-efficient data centers, and we have a development pipeline of 1.4 gigawatts. So the scale at which the industry and also AirTrunk develop is large, and the energy transition and getting that right is really critical to our success in our business and our industry. And then the third one, similar to what Georgia mentioned, also for AirTrunk, we have very ambitious sustainability targets. We have a net zero by 2030 target. There's a lot more information and data in our sustainability report. We published the third one today, actually. But this is a big focus at AirTrunk. And specifically for the Asia region, we wanted to understand better what is the pathways and what is the challenges, not just to net zero, but really to full power sector decarbonization. And that's why we recently worked with McKinsey to produce a report, Powering a Clean Energy Future, also available on our website, or I can send it to you, where we looked at what are the challenges, what are the gaps, but also what are the unlocks, and especially in the markets here in Asia Pacific where we operate.
Excellent, thank you. So the IEA estimates that the world needs to triple the installed capacity of renewables and double the rate of energy intensity improvements by 2030 to meet our climate commitments and limit global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. There's a crucial role for large corporates and industrial consumers, particularly in emerging economies, to accelerate the deployment of renewables by bringing in additional capital through procurement of their own clean electricity supply. Accelerating decarbonization in growing economies in Asia is especially important, as the region currently accounts for 65% of the global power sector emissions. Already today, in the region, like in regions like in the United States, we see that corporate procurement of clean electricity represents the lion's share of renewable energy capacity coming online. And last year, the IEA published a report as well on accelerating decarbonization through clean electricity procurement. And our analysis found that the efforts focusing on higher granularity tracking of electricity generation can lead to the development of power system with a more diversified mix of dispatchable low-carbon technologies, as opposed to the efforts that simply match on an annual basis. So now I'll turn to the panelists to share their views on the benefits and challenges of setting up this procurement approach in the Asia-Pacific region. So Joscha, you just mentioned you and your team at AirTrunk have recently released this Power a Clean Energy Future report, which was really a call to action to the industry and governments in the Asia-Pacific region to forge a pathway to tap into 24/7 approach. Could you share with us your thoughts on the primary benefits from and some of the more significant challenges from this report?
Sure. I think what we realized is, we have a bit further to go in the region, both in terms of, renewable penetration, carbon-free energy, but also from a cost perspective. So one of the things we modeled in the report is, what is the cost of achieving 100% renewable on average versus 100% on an hourly matching basis? And I think there's a lot of research that shows in Europe and North America, you can get to 90, 95% hourly matching with a pretty reasonable cost gap. There's that research out there. And in our report, we found that gap is a bit larger in the markets here that we work in. So there is a cost gap. The second challenge is then on the products and the commercial offerings. So sort of the market isn't yet offering. If I wanted to go out there and contract an hourly matching product, the market is developing. And we did one deal last year in Hong Kong with a utility where we did sign an hourly matching contract. But we would like to see more of those. And we're seeing the market is perhaps not as far developing those as in other countries. So that's the challenges. But the benefits are really important, and for us, the benefits is, why are we looking at this? You could say, hey, as a data center, I'm struggling to find any renewable energy in some of the markets. Why am I looking at hourly matching now, right? Why am I reaching so high? And for us, there's three clear reasons. This is, a very important topic for us to solve. The first one is, as you mentioned before, we have a flat load profile. Data centers, very flat energy consumer. So we don't just need wind and solar. We also need technologies that go at night or when there's no solar, when there's no wind. Otherwise, we have a mismatch of what we're buying versus what we're using. So commercially, it's in our own interest to sort this out. Second one, we need clean energy. But as a mission-critical data center, we need reliable, stable, high-quality power. That is as important as clean. It needs to be stable, clean power. And we're not just going to get stable, clean power with wind and solar, which are great technologies and have great potential, but we need other technologies to firm this, to balance this load. So we need these technologies to have that clean and stable and reliable power grid in our region. And then lastly, we are a sector that is growing, where our energy consumption is increasing. And we see competing demands for green energy, from electrification, from green hydrogen, from electric vehicles. So as a sector, it is really important that we help develop the solutions and bring in the sufficient amount of clean energy to allow for that growth. So in that sense, 24/7 clean energy, we think it's clear that this is the end goal. And we need full power sector decarbonization. This is where we end up. This is perhaps the North Star where we go. So if we start on the journey now, there's an opportunity to plan together how we're going to get there in the least cost pathway.
Thank you very much, Joshua. So it seems to me that this higher granularity accounting is the ultimate aim, and it's very closely linked with electricity market structures, which is quite diverse in this Asia-Pacific region. And so there, Joshua, I'll turn to you to explain, perhaps from your perspective, pathways, how we could reach this North Star that you mentioned.
Yeah, what Joshua just said resonates with us, because of course, we want that North Star to create the incentives that are the incentives driving the decarbonization of grids. So, what good does it make if we just say, okay, our data center runs on 100% renewables, but in reality, we're still incentivizing fossil fuel that is present into the grid. So, in terms of pathways, maybe, Rina, let me take just a little step back, saying, let's look at the overall picture of what we have here in Asia, right? So we see, on one hand, corporate consumers, a lot of demand, ambitious targets being set by many companies who want to be part of the solution. This is great. 4.6 gigawatt of announced power purchase agreements, corporate PPAs in our region only last year, a record high. On the other hand, well, it's a region rich of resources. We have solar, we have wind, we have hydro. Global Wind Energy Council estimates that in the next 10 years, 380 gigawatt of offshore wind will be added to the grid. And out of this, half, or nearly half, will be in Asia. So it's a fantastic opportunity because we see this demand from corporate buyers and we see this supply, these resources being available in our region. So it's time to accelerate this, to catalyze this effort and to get this demand and this supply come together. So policy is extremely important. We need to create the environments that allow this supply and this demand to meet each other, right? So grid interconnection, so access to power purchase agreement structures, and everything that needs to happen in order for this, shift to happen. The other thing is technology. So advanced carbon-free energy technologies, so how to deploy them, how to develop them. We can't rely only on one or two carbon-free energy technologies that are mature, even though we should exploit them as much as possible, right? But that we need to be able to send signals from a procurement perspective, so from an off-taker's perspective, to send signals to the market that we need an inclusive mix of technologies. We need a portfolio of technologies, because this is what will eventually decarbonize grids faster. And the second one is on investments. So just to give you an example, Google has invested $2.9 billion since 2010 on renewable energy technologies, and our spend for renewable energy is projected by 2040 to be reaching 10 billion. So it's impressive figures, but I think we need to continue to incentivize through investments, procurement signals, and policy.
Thank you very much, Giorgio. And that's great to hear that you put up importance on the policy as well, because through the dissemination activities of our report at the IEA on corporate procurement, we've been discussing with various policymakers and regulators in different jurisdictions. And in terms of what policymakers can do, we're often posed the question whether policymakers should even be involved, given that we're speaking about voluntary initiatives here. But from our side, the answer is definitely yes. And of course, the specific policy solutions to enable clean electricity procurement and ensure system integration are quite unique to each country. The one bit we found common to most emerging markets is the lack of data. So good quality, accessible data that brings together information on real-time generation, the state of the power system, and that allows for tracking emissions is still missing. Improving access to power system data is one of the key areas where policymakers and regulators can set a level playing field and accelerate the development of clean energy. So a final question for both of you. What do you believe are the key unlocks or breakthroughs necessary to realize this 24/7 approach in the Asia-Pacific region in the next decade? And how does AirTrunk and Google envision data centers and tech companies playing a role in this? Josha, to start with.
Thank you, Rina. I think you raise a good point on data, and that was one of the drivers why we published this report, to help us with data and inform what the pathways and the unlocks are. So we said that the costs, if we do this today, are a bit higher. So what are the technologies and pathways that bring us there? And I mean, this is in the report, and I'll share a couple of highlights. I think the first one, and we heard a lot about this, is interconnection. We were really pleased, what we heard from Mr. Nyam this morning, from Mr. Rushton this morning, on the drive to interconnection. Because that's also in the report what we see. The larger the grid, the larger the connected area, the lower the cost of firming, the lower the cost of clean energy. And, of course, this is in the ASEAN area, but we also modeled this in Australia, for example. On the East Coast, where we have Victoria and New South Wales connecting, we get Europe-like portfolio effects. Wind in different locations, solar in different locations, hydro, different technologies. And actually what this does, it brings down the cost of firming. And so you get regions that perhaps have, let's say, average renewable resource. They're actually beating those locations with great renewable resource because they have interconnection, right? So that's number one. Number two is to bring in new technologies, and Giorgio also spoke about this, long-duration energy storage, other firming technologies that are not quite yet commercialized or deployed as much, bring them in, But also this could be not just electrons, it could be sort of molecules as well. Green hydrogen, we heard a lot about low carbon ammonia announcements on Monday. And we think in our region, this could perhaps play a bigger role in the power sector than maybe in some other regions. So this is the second one. The third one is really lifting the potential of locally available resource. And you mentioned it's the resource-rich regions, but in every market, the path to 24/7 clean energy will look slightly different. In Australia, there's great pump storage, for example, on the East Coast. In Malaysia, there's biogas that provides firming energy. In Indonesia and other countries, there's geothermal. So there's a variety of local resource technologies, and we found that those will always be cheaper than perhaps the technologies that aren't quite mature yet. And then for us also as data centers, we are resource-rich assets. We have backup energy. And as we move to clean backup energy, how can we make that available for firming and then reduce the cost for the system to do that? And then finally, how can we work together and collaborate with the regulators, policymakers, grid companies, energy industry to say, where we see the load growth, where we see the renewable growth, where we see the transmission growth, if we coordinate that and we bring that together, the costs are going to be lower.
Yeah, some of the points are really interesting, and I want to elaborate on. So the first point, I would say, going back to technology, work with what you have, right? I mean, there are technologies that are mature. That's a good news. We have those technologies available today. Let's do as much as we can with them. We also need to be able to work to retire carbon-emitting technologies. And that's, something that needs to happen. And a third, investment in R&D, portfolio of different technologies, firming, carbon-free energy. So, of course, our load is constant as data centers are running on a constant load. So, it's very important to have that mix. Second, grid interconnection and competitive wholesale electricity markets. We can't decide where the renewable energy is, right? Mother Nature has decided that wind is available here, solar is available here, and our electricity system have traditionally not been built with renewable energy in mind, right? Because we have generation very close to consumption. So we need to rethink and expand those electricity markets so that we can bring renewables where we actually need the electricity. And third, access. So we need to make sure that every consumer, small or big, is able to selectively procure renewable energy from generators. So we have seen policy developments happening in our part of the world, which are very encouraging. New corporate green power procurement scheme in Malaysia, the pilot. We have the Japan opening up for PPAs recently. And so, this is happening. I'm very confident that this will happen more and more, and that I hope that more corporate consumers will have access to corporate PPAs.
Okay. Thank you both then for the great insights and comments. I'd like to wrap up this session with some concluding remarks. And so I heard that we have to pay particular attention on a number of things, one of them being enhancing the grids. So interconnection between countries, but also to connect the renewable resources which are quite far from the consumption centers today. And policymakers and regulators need to be on board to enable various procurement approaches. This way, more private investment can be leveraged to clean energy in the future. And data is key. It's a key enabler of this, and a no regrets action. So structured frameworks need to be set up across the region so that all stakeholders can benefit from this data. We expect a diversity of technologies to be deployed and innovative approaches are being tested. The key takeaway from this panel is that we need to do the hard work now to flesh out the pathway towards this North Star and the energy transition. This way it will be smoother. On that note, I'd like to conclude this session and thank you everyone for being here.
Thank you, speakers, for the wonderful session. May we invite you back to your seat, please. Thank you. Our next session on AI Smart and Sustainable City is presented by NEC APAC. Please join me in welcoming on stage Mr. Alok Kumar, Corporate Officer and Senior Vice President, Head of Global Smart City Business at NEC Corporation, and President and CEO, NEC Corporation India. Moderating this session is Mr. Devan Chaya, Partner Infrastructure Advisory, KPMG in Singapore. Gentlemen, please.
Very good morning to all of you. We are close to lunch, so we'll try and keep it as interesting as possible. Cities, or the genius of cities, as Dr. Edward Kleiser mentions, is the only hope we have in terms of achieving a reasonably high net zero state. The reason is about the density. Surprisingly, the more dense we are, the better we can manage our decarbonization. And that's why cities offer us a hope for decarbonizing and reaching our collective net zero goals. So today, I would like to open up the discussion with Alok on what would be the prime challenges that are currently being faced by mayors of various cities. And if you can also highlight the plight of the tier 2 cities in particular, which is where funding is quite inadequate. The sovereign guarantees are very difficult to find. So those are the kind of challenges maybe you can highlight a bit more.
Thank you, Devin, and thanks for having me here. Thank you for listening, audience. The way Devin started this session, I already feel the pressure of delivering on net zero from the city side. But jokes apart, I think the biggest challenge that most of the stakeholders who are managing the cities are facing are actually some of the things that we have been discussing in the morning. Number one is longevity and long-term commitment of funds. When I say longevity, I mean to say that if you look around the world, most of the countries are working in a democracy. And democracy has a short lifespan. Every certain number of years, there is elections and there is political compulsions that then makes the long-term commitment of fund become a little bit more myopic. But the bigger impact of this is that, therefore, there is a little bit of a rush to define the scope of the projects in a time span, and therefore I use the term longevity, in a time span that can get completed within the term of the government. Yeah. And I'm trying to be as politically correct as possible when I say this, because that's the reality. To build a really smart city, you need a multi-generation, multi-decade master blueprint. Just like we were talking about in the building the energy corridors. I mean, some of the discussions that we are having, I mean, come to think about it, these will take multi-decades to kind of bring it all together. And so is the case with smart cities. So that's number one. Number two, I think because of the scoping of the work becoming small, you have a lot of disjointed, fractured projects. So investments are still happening, scope gets reduced, and a lot of disjointed projects are coming to take shape. Therefore, you may not feel that in a country like Singapore, if most of you are from Singapore, but most of you, or many of you who are coming from outside Singapore, Indonesia, India, Malaysia, when you're traveling long corridors of the country, your experience with smart city in a point A and a point B is very different. And that's because the mayor in point A think that the compulsion and the realities of smart city that is required to be solved for a city A is very different from city B. It may be smart transportation in city A, but it may be a smart commuting in city B. And therefore, when you're traveling from city A to city B, you do not experience the smartness of the smart city, if I may say. So I think the mayors, and especially in smaller cities, which gets out of the jurisdiction of large central federal budgets, the budgets are even smaller. And therefore, the ambitions are also smaller. And therefore, somewhere in the de-scoping scenario, there's a lot of, I would say, disjointed ambitions and disjointed projects that begins to take place. So I often am asked this question that, you all are doing a lot of smart city projects, but how come I'm not feeling it? First of all, you need to tell me, what do you want to feel, number one. Number two is that though you're not feeling it because it's very, very different. If you're going from the airport, today we are running a project as NEC where, and Singapore already has it, where your facial recognition becomes your boarding pass, your immigration pass. In large cities where you have very high volume of passengers going through the airport, and you don't have to wait for 30 minutes to just get inside the airport, that can be a fantastic experience. Right? So that's experience A. But if you go to another city and you do not experience that airport, you are going to feel like I'm not getting the full value of what smart city investments are. So I would say the longevity and the long-term commitment of investments are the two big things that the mayors are, and they are also solving for this phenomena of political commitments.
A friend of mine from a very far-off place, from Singapore, often refers to Singapore as Planet Singapore instead of city. So I guess the city really makes the best case of spoiling us. So in a way, it also is about the role of the system integrators, because the challenge is quite disparate in terms of the larger cities, the smaller cities, the upcoming cities, and there are mayors, as you mentioned, who have limitation on terms, who also want to deliver results in a shorter period of time, but they do want to project a vision which can make them a lot more electable in the next run. So it's also about how much is deliverable in shorter periods of time and looking at the overall vision. So NEC being an SI, how do you see the role of SIs evolving over this change that we are seeing? It's no longer about providing just pure Wi-Fi, for example. It is no longer about providing the easy access to transport apps, because that's almost entirely taken over by private. So what are the challenges that you see that mayors face, and how does your role as an SI evolve in this changing landscape?
Just for the context of the, just for the benefit of the audience, some of you may be very close to smart city, some of you may have just a very peripheral understanding of it. But smart city encompasses enabling a lot of smart sensors that could be in waste management, smart grid, transportation, aviation, smart water meter, traffic management. So there's a whole lot of sensors that are put around the city. And a system integrator like ourselves, master system integrator, our job is to pull the data from each of these sensors and contextualize it for the stakeholders to make faster decision making. So just so you understand the smart city and the role of a system integrator. Now, in that background, MSIs, if I put a spectrum of what a master system integrator can achieve, number one is, at a very basic level, is smart project management. At the middle, evolving from there would be technical and technology integrators. So you understand technology and you have cameras and you have weather sensors and you have waste bin monitors. These are three different technology and three different sensors. How do you integrate that so that a mayor in a city or a corporation in a city is able to make smart decisions around it? So that's the second piece of it. And in the far end of the spectrum, I would say, is when the MSIs becomes a partner to the stakeholders, to the mayors and to the city governments. I would say that we are somewhere in the middle of that spectrum, more towards the lower side, and we are definitely, we are asked to do the role of project managers, but of late we are also, and we are expected to do a technology integrator role, but sometimes a lot of the technology is very well defined even before MSIs come in. So, cities tell us what's the specification of a camera that they need on top of on top of a pole. And therefore, you may come back and say that, look, if you had taken a higher spec, it would have been better for you. But anyways, those specs are already written. So point I'm making is that we do partial role of a technology advisor. We do a role of a technology integrator. And that's where the real opportunity is, and of course, becoming a partner. So I think we are evolving as a master system integrator to be able to pull and do the project management, complex project management for the government. However, I think there is a very important role that MSIs can play the world over in not just advising the government on how to make this master multi 5-year plan, but also be an enabler to say, when will what technology obsolescence occur? And therefore, how do you plan your investment so that you can layer the best return on your investment? Today, the ROI view on smart city is still very, very, I would say, at a nascent stage. People are still looking at this as a CapEx investment that goes in, and you just want to cut the ribbon. Whereas I think what we should take in a little bit of an ROI view, and therefore bringing the partner, the end of the spectrum that I talked about, bringing the partner role somewhere along with the technology integrator and advisor role will be beneficial for everybody, for the ecosystem.
Great. I think that is great food for thought, because the evolving nature of the services which are required by various city administrations is changing rapidly. One of the key examples is, of course, since morning, we have had about 2 or 3 sessions already dealing with electric mobility, electrifying everything, which is the key theme. If you can't abate, you electrify. If you electrify everything, there is definitely an inherent challenge which cities will face, is in terms of how do you power the electrification. Electrifying transport, for example, is going to put a significant load, extra load on the electrical systems today. The grids are going to have a challenge. So the enormity of the challenges are increasing as we go into a decarbonized world. The energy transition that the cities are looking for is also not the easy path, because they need to now, we have heard about multiple technologies that can be leveraged to provide that end energy transition roadmap. But all said and done, city mayors do need the help that goes beyond the current state of affairs. And therefore, I want to bring the very important topic of artificial intelligence. How does a city mayor leverage AI in solving not only his or her current problems, which are already enormous, but adding to that is the thought that everything needs to be sustainative. Everything that they think about has to be natively ingrained in sustainability. So how does AI, according to you, play a role in helping city administrations to not solve, but maybe approach the problem in a different manner?
Yeah, it's a great question, and one of my favorite in the job that I do. Just before I answer that question, you see, if you look at the evolution of smart city across the world, there is a group of countries that have jumped into smart city, but if you look at what they have done, is they've put a lot of smart infrastructure. So you have got a lot of sensors, you've got a lot of cameras, you've got a lot of intelligence to tell you how to make the infrastructure automated. The next wave of smart city is actually leveraging the power of AI and ML and blockchain, which is actually creating the algorithm and the super layer on top of that to make the decision-making automated. And some of the countries that are actually following now, which are so-called followers of smart cities, actually have the advantage of that. That's point number one. I'll come back to this. The second big point on AI is that, there was a time that technology was converting data to information. I think we all know that, right? Technology is converting, they pick data, they organize the data, we look at the dashboards, and we say, okay, there's information for us. So data gets converted to information. The power of AI is to convert information into knowledge. And what I mean by that is, this super layer that we are talking about, which is on top of the physical infrastructure, on top of the feeds that are coming from the camera, what do you make sense of it? Let me give you an example. a use case of an AI implementation in video analytics is a project that we are doing right now where women in distress can be identified without actually women shouting out or somebody crowding around her. Through her physical actions, through the way she is behaving, the camera can pick up that information and pull that information back to a central command center, which again can be hierarchied, can be tiered, so that the closest police van, lawkeeper van, can be dispatched to that location based on their GPS grab that you get from the camera. So just to give you an example that this is not just about getting a camera feed of a woman. This is getting a camera feed of a woman that defines it as distress, that sends that signal to a particular, through a particular SLA, to a gatekeeper or a stakeholder, in this case the police, to go and get dispatched. And all of that happened within seconds. So the power of AI in today's world, and that we are witnessing, it's currently getting deployed at scale, is to ingest phenomenal amount of data. You can't imagine the amount of data that is getting produced in large, densely populated countries that needs to get processed. Now, the same example, if the women in distress, if you keep getting false alarms, then they will be distressed in the system, right? So you need to make sure that in an environment where, let's say, there is a large festival happening, and there is a congregation of hundreds and thousands of people, and there is a call to attention for a woman in distress. The beauty of AI is to be able to zero in on that particular example, and that needs to be not negative false. It needs to be a positive false. So the ingestion of the amount of data that AI can help cities consume is taking this smart city implementation to a different scale. I was very recently, I won't name the country, but I was very recently in a region which is extremely affluent region, and again, I won't name it. They have all the money in the world, and they have all the infrastructure in the world. They have smart drainage, smart water, smart video cameras. They have the highest concentration of video cameras in the world that they have put. So when I walked in, I said, what's the role that we can play, sir? This minister basically said that we have all this infrastructure, but it's of no use to me because I'm not able to make out anything. That what do I do with this? So we need you to come in with this so-called artificial intelligence layer, the use cases, the application layer on top, to make sense, to convert this information into knowledge. And I think that's the real power of AI. I hope I'm able to bring that out.
Great. I think we have had multiple sessions talking about the EVs, and the biggest challenge that we have had is the adoption is low because of range anxiety, as it is called, where the battery may not be enough for the road ahead. The use of this particular technology, maybe it just struck me, is driver in distress. So you make out using AI when the person is suffering from range anxiety and possibly push information about the next charger there on a lighter note.
I'll just build on that. Actually, just to contextualize from an energy consumption, that information you can get from, once you have, in Europe, if you go, you will know what's your next charging point, and you can plan that. It's like, where is my next gas station? So you can plan that out. But on the management side of this energy, what AI can do is actually help you forecast the demand by the minute and by the hour, by the concentration of the type of car that is getting used and the type of car. If it's a hydrogen power car that is floating around in the highway, then you know what is the demand of that. So the AI can help normalize and aggregate the demand and forecasting, and therefore make the city consumption of this energy a lot more practical and less human dependent. Because sometimes the decisions that these so-called stakeholders have to make has to be within a fraction of a second, and therefore, AI through the automated response systems that can be built can be a huge leverage for the future.
I think the way we are going to be approaching grid balancing in the future, we are going to approach the energy management overall in the future, will be quite driven by what we can make out of AI, because it's simply going to be impossible for us to manage the kind of data load that is going to come from the various metering infrastructures, drivers who are going to give data back from an EV. All those are going to have an impact. So if I can conclude the discussion, I would say that we have a path ahead. We have challenges ahead. Of course, we have the technology, both operational technologies as well as AI, to positively help us achieve the net zero goals of many of the cities that we are going to work with. If you can provide me one parting thought on what city leaders need to think about when they try and approach AI, very quickly.
I think a lot of times, linking it to the energy under discussion, a lot of times people think of, energy and the management of energy demand in a smart city to be something that we need to worry about later. Because let's get the pipe first, let's get the renewable energy supply first, and let's get all the other things first, and then we can put on top. I don't think that's the right approach. I think we need to start thinking of it now so that your next building that we are building can be made a lot more smarter. Next transport infrastructure that we are building can be made into smart transportation. And I think this incremental thinking of let the highway come first, then I will think of the car, that thinking needs to change. I think we need to think of the car even before the highway is getting built. So that's, I would say, is.
Thank you, Alok. Thank you for the wonderful thoughts.
Pleasure.
And thank you, audience. You stayed back before lunch, so thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen, for the insightful discussion. May I invite you back to your seats, please. Thank you, gentlemen. And now, ladies and gentlemen, we'll proceed our next session on Shell Startup Engine. Singapore startups lead the charge for a lower carbon world. Please join me in welcoming on stage Ms. Ong Lei Hua, Energy Transition Manager of Shell Singapore, for her opening remarks. Ms. Ong, please.
I actually prepared a good morning, but it has turned to a good afternoon, distinguished guests. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Lei Hua, and I head the Energy Transition team in Shell Singapore. I'm part of the committee for the Shell Startup Engine program. It's a pleasure to share with you that we'll be having 8 local startups present their exciting innovations to you. They will talk about how they will help to accelerate net zero in their own ways for Singapore and for the world. We're very proud that they're part of Shell Startup Engine cohort this year in Singapore. The SSE is a global innovation program with a Singapore chapter targeted at early to mid-stage local energy startups. Through a 6-month accelerated program, SSE aims to build startups' capabilities and networks to position them for success in the smart, clean energy landscape. This is also fully in line with Shell's ambition to become a net zero emissions company by 2050 and supports the national agenda of sustainable development. We seek to create value for society through enterprise development. We've heard a lot about collaboration and partnership, and we're very glad to partner with Energy Market Authority and collaborate with ecosystem supporters like Enterprise Singapore, Innovation Partner for Impact Singapore, and the very vibrant investment community to help the local energy startup ecosystem thrive. So let me hand over now to our moderator, Ricardo, and the first group of startups for the panel session. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ricardo Costa. I'm the Program Director from Startup Bootcamp for the Shell Startup Engine Singapore Accelerator Program. So Startup Bootcamp is the main delivery partner for this accelerator program with Shell, not only in Singapore, but other countries such as Brazil and the UK. And I'm honored And it's a pleasure to be here moderating these discussions with 8 incredible Singaporean startups who are innovating in the energy and sustainability spaces and have joined the cohort to accelerate their journey to growth and scalability. So our first panel will focus on circularity in the energy transition. And circularity is all about moving from a linear economy to an economy where materials and resources are repurposed, reused, and recycled. And a sustainable energy transition requires circularity and circular economy practices, right? So we'll hear from local startups innovating in this space, Alton Renewables, Green Issue, SG Recycle, and Solvay Technology. We have the founders and leaders of startups here today. So to kick off, can you guys please introduce yourselves, your startups, and how they're contributing to circularity and the energy transition? Maybe starting with Wehan from Alton.
Thank you, Ricardo. So Alton Renewables solves the problem of wet waste by turning them into fuels very efficiently. So wet waste, such as unconsumed food, sewage, and oil sludge, have a lot of water in them, which makes them very difficult and expensive to treat. And because of the high treatment costs, more than 80% of the wet waste generated in Singapore and around the world are actually being incinerated, landfilled, or just recklessly dumped. And our solution to this problem is a proprietary chemical process that can instead convert this waste into valuable fuels. And this reduces the disposal cost as well as the environmental impact. We have successfully proven our technology in the lab, and we are currently working on scaling it up into a pilot project.
Thank you, Wehan. Susmita?
Hello everyone, I'm Shushmita, co-founder and CTO of Green Issue. Green Issue is a climate tech startup. We are developing bio-based and sustainable ingredients to replace microplastic and plastic ingredients used in the cosmetic and home care product. So in our 96% of daily care product contain microplastic. So after single use, these microplastics are non-recyclable and ends up in ocean and river, and it's ultimately polluting our environment and also endangering human health. So in Green Issue, we are developing a platform technology and green biogenic process to discover bio-based and biodegradable ingredients to replace microplastic in a cost-effective way that can fit the needs of the industry currently. And also, we have developed our POC and the lab-based product ready, and we are scaling up our product right now.
Thank you. Marvin?
Hi all, I'm Marvin, co-founder of SG Recycle. So SG Recycle actually uses technology to reduce contamination for recycling. We users SG Recycle actually, there's a load cell in place whereby we check all the drops and make sure that it's all accurate live data sent to building owners and the user itself. So the user itself can actually key in their mobile number onto the screen itself, and then they can get points and earn their rewards from there. We not only collect the waste. Why is it circular? It's because we actually process the waste itself as well. We currently have a paper bill machine and e-waste processing plant. We have a battery processing plant. We recover solar panel as well and precious metal. Yep.
Thank you, Marvin. Yeah, I'm sure some of the members in the audience have seen your smart pins around Singapore. Gimen, if you...
Hi everyone. This is Grimin from SolveIt. I'm the CTO and co-founder. And SolveIt is a local startup. We are a spin-off from National University. And we aim to decarbonize solvent separations for industries. Why solvents? Solvents are widely used in the industries to make valuable products. And each year, more than 1 billion tons of them are purified by thermal separations like distillation, boiling basically, consuming huge amount of energy and leading to millions of tons of carbon emission. And at SolveIt, we aim to change that with our energy-efficient nanofilters. Our nanofilters purify solvents just like water treatment done by seawater desalination membrane technology, purifies the solvent without the use of heat and cooling water. So thus leading to 90% of energy saving. So we have demonstrated our product at a local company, pilot tested for 3 months, and we are now talking to more companies to try out our solutions. Thank you.
Terrific. Thank you, Giman. I might throw it back to Ihan for a second question. You guys are in the waste to value space, right? So just curious, why did you choose to focus on wet waste specifically, and what makes wet waste particularly challenging to process?
So having been in the waste industry for several years, we have realized that wet waste is a major problem. Despite the existence of many mature technologies, most of the wet waste are still being recklessly discarded. And these unsustainable practices not only cause significant pollution to the environment, but also a loss of untapped resources. So we see this as an opportunity to revolutionize the industry by making wet waste a valuable resource. The challenge comes from the presence of water in the waste. Most current technologies use heat to break down waste, and because of that, a lot of energy is required to dry the waste before the conversion even starts. And for wet waste, this is extremely inefficient. So to solve this issue, our technology uses the water content in the wet waste itself to speed up the chemical process. And because of this, our efficiency gives us the competitive edge and allows us to be more compact, sustainable, and economical.
Thank you, Ihan. Yeah, definitely an important and difficult challenge to tackle. Susmita, you mentioned you're focusing on cosmetics and the home care industries. And there are quite a number of microplastic alternatives out there in the market currently. How is Greenissue different?
Yes, sure. Actually, currently industry is looking for three things. That is sustainable product, high performance, and cost. So there are few products that people are currently extracting from directly nature, but those are quite sustainable, but they are actually lack of performance. But there are other type of product where people use biogenic processes and bioprocesses to develop high performance bio-based material. Those materials are really also sustainable, but cost is very high. So in that case, it's hard to close the barrier. So in Greenissue, actually, we are developing a sustainable platform technology where we merge these three criteria together, and we are building a biogenic process and also biogenic process and the AI system to develop a green technology where we develop the material in a sustainable way and also in the cost-effective way so that existing consumer can easily grab the material in their product.
Amazing how you managed to balance those three different parameters. Marvin, going back to recycling, can you elaborate a little bit on how you believe recycling can contribute to solving the climate change problem, and what makes SG Recycle particularly well positioned to tackle this issue in Singapore?
Thank you, Ricardo. So using recycled item and supporting recycling, actually it reduces carbon emission, energy consumption, and the waste itself. So by supporting recycling, you reduces the virgin materials needed and translate to lesser fossil fuel being used to churn out the raw materials. So why SG Recycle? SG Recycle has 140 locations across Singapore now. We have 40,000 users, and we have collected 19,000 tons of waste, which is about the size of 3 times the size of Marina Bay Sands. Yeah, we have reduced the national contamination level from 40% to 0%, close to 0%, I should say. And by using recyclable, we actually give recyclable a second life and reduces it from going to the incineration plant. Yeah, thank you, Ricardo.
That's amazing. I mean, 3 MBS's worth of waste is not an insignificant amount, so congratulations on those numbers. Guiman, you talked about solvent recovery, which might be a sort of a technical term for a lot of people. Can you elaborate on what it is, why is it important, and are there any environmental impacts from current practices that Solvate is helping mitigate?
Yeah, thanks, Ricardo. So solvent recovery, in simple terms, is to purify the used or contaminated solvents for recycling in industrial processes. So the amount of solvents used in the industrial processes is huge. It's, for example, it's like more than 1 billion tons for the chemical, edible oil, pharmaceutical ingredient production. So for example, in the edible oil industry, it takes 4 tons of solvent to extract 1 ton of this edible oil, like soybean oil. And for the pharmaceutical drug ingredient, it takes like even more solvents, 20 tons, in fact, to produce 1 ton of drug ingredient. So all in, each year the amount of solvent that to be purified and separated from these products are huge. It's more than 1 billion tons. And the energy go into it is need to burn the fossil fuel to generate. So it's more than like 1 million tons of carbon dioxide generated. So in ours, we have to reduce the carbon emission by using our nano filters that is just like water treatment. Our membranes do not use heat or cooling water, so it's a more energy efficient way of treating the solvents.
Awesome.
Yep. Thank you.
Incredible how Alten and Solvate, you've managed to unlock an impact just by executing processes at lower temperatures and reducing the carbon and energy intensiveness of those processes. Wihan, maybe throwing back to you, your technology, in converting wet waste to valuable minerals and resources, what are the industries that can benefit the most from that technology, you would say?
So wet waste is produced in many industries. So for instance, we have the food waste from the food and beverage and agriculture industries. We have biosludge from the sewerage and wastewater treatment industries. And also we have oil sludge from the petrochemical and maritime industries. So all these industries can benefit from our technology by recovering costs from their wet waste. But for now, our immediate focus is on food waste because it is in abundance, and it is also a major problem for the food producers. Currently, we are working with partners in waste collection and waste treatment to see if we can integrate our technology into the current supply chains. And we intend to build a pilot plant in the next year. And with our technology, we hope that we can cut disposal costs by more than 15%.
Thank you, Wihan. If there's anyone in those industries in the audience, I invite you to connect with Wihan and Alten afterwards. We're running out of time for the first panel, so I thank you, the founders, yeah, please feel free to take your seats back. And I'll invite the next group of startups to discuss. Yep, thanks. Please give it up. Thank you, guys. Thank you. So I'll invite the next group of 4 startups to discuss the very important theme of scaling innovations in energy. We've gathered here this week to discuss energy, so we all know how important and a vital part of our lives energy is. However, scaling innovations, particularly in a complex industry like the energy sector, from idea to prototype to commercially ready product, can be a daunting and challenging task. So today we have 4 local startups in different stages of growth, ready to talk about their journeys to commercialize and scale exciting innovations. So we have Nander from Flint, John from Nicadorico, Inder from Alicia Bots, and Cian from Ground Up AI. Thank you guys for being here today. Similarly to the first group, just wanted to give you a quick opportunity to introduce yourselves, your startups, and how they're contributing or supporting a lower carbon future. Welcome.
Okay, thank you, Ricardo. This is Nanda, one of the research analysts at Flint. So we all know that the world is moving to a greener and renewable future. So that's we move to a renewable future where we mostly depend on batteries. But the battery we are using today are not sustainable. So at Flint, we are trying to build a sustainable battery, cost-effective, and also concern the energy security without using lithium, nickel, and cobalt. So with all these motifs, we've been creating a battery using the advantages of the cellulose papers, and on the other hand, try to use the abundant electrical material for cost and safety. So because of that, our battery became cheaper and also safer than the lithium battery. So now we are almost in the last stage of battery chemistry optimizations, and we're trying to move to the production and testing our product really soon. Yeah.
Thank you, Nanda. If you guys couldn't see, Nanda is holding a paper battery that looks exactly like a sheet of paper, quite exciting. John, if you don't mind telling us a little bit about Nicadorico.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Johan, or you can call me John for short. I'm a co-founder of Nica.eco. We are an AI climate tech company based in Singapore. Just a brief background, I previously used to work at Amazon Web Services together with my co-founder. We were AI specialists and working on ranking algorithms at Amazon. And we were really, I think the problem that we're really looking to solve is that we saw a lot of our friends from traditional finance moving into climate finance, but not really having the access to properly understand models and how to apply that with corresponding complex carbon methodologies. So really starting in the carbon market, specifically in nature-based solutions, our company has developed 2 products that we've really been able to scale across about 200 enterprise customers that are really willing to partner and pilot with us. The first product being Nika Feasibility, which is a simple AI tool that helps our customers determine the eligibility, economic opportunity, as well as risk associated with early-stage carbon projects, as well as second product, Carbon GPT, which has gained large traction, which is a large language learning model that's been trained across a host of all carbon methodologies across the world, allowing our customers to help their junior staff upskill, as well as help them draft potential documents that align with existing methodologies.
Thank you, John. Inder?
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me here. My name is Inder. I'm the founder of Alicia Bots. Alicia Bots is a maritime robotics company focused on underwater applications within the maritime as well as oil and gas industries. Now, each year, around 37 million metric tons, accounting for $25 billion of fuel, is spent on a problem called hull fouling, which is basically like the underwater areas of the ship over a period of time become a colony for marine growth, which increases its fuel consumptions. And thereby, each year, 37 million metric tons of fuel is consumed. Now, we at Alicia Bots, we have developed a portable underwater magnetic crawling robot, which actually inspects as well as cleans these underwater areas while the ship is moving and done by the ship staff.
Thank you, Inder. Sian.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Sian, and I'm the head of marketing and product lead at GroundUp AI. So we are an industrial AI startup, and we help companies from like manufacturing, maritime, and the heavy asset owners to reduce unplanned downtime. So how we do that is we first install our IoT sensors on the client's machinery, and from there we collect all the machine's data and information. Then from there we use our proprietary AI to uncover intelligent insights. So predicting when the machine may break down, also providing recommendations on how to solve the problem. So it's really something like Jarvis helping Tony Stark. Yeah, so with that, we help companies to reduce unplanned downtime, provide more insights to the maintenance teams way in advance so they can take more proactive approach, and also to promote sustainability with reduced energy wastages with the machines in tip-top condition.
Thank you, Sian. Yeah, thanks, guys. Such a diverse group of startups and products, I'd say. Going back to you, Nanda, Flint, you guys are a very young team of innovators, but you're doing big things, right? You're working on paper batteries, which is quite a novel technology. So just curious, what were the main milestones for Flint so far that demonstrates that this is a feasible and scalable product?
Well, if we look at our technology in the past, it's not possible because the battery is a primary battery, which means it can use only once. But with the technology advancement, our battery is possible because we add new chemistry, and that makes our battery rechargeable. And it's also fully composable. We already test and prove that, like by bury 1 cm our battery in the nitrous swines, and after 6 weeks, it's completely degraded. So we have to understand that lithium battery has been developing over the past few decades. But at Flint, we just came in and could able to achieve up to 60% of the performance of standard lithium battery. So that's the biggest achievement by itself, and considering our development. And we could able to manage to fabricate our battery in 2 ways. Like the first one is the same fabrication process like lithium battery decks, and another one is fabricating the electrode material on both sides of the paper. So that means our battery can not only replace in the lithium battery production lines in the future, and it can also produce intense, super driven, flexible way. So yeah, we're really excited to see where we can go to the future with more potentials and more resources. Yeah, thank you.
That's amazing. I mean, the highlights for me, 6 weeks to biodegrade and 60% of the performance of lithium batteries. That's amazing results. John, you mentioned you're using AI to automate and accelerate processes in the carbon markets, right? Specifically, can you talk a little bit about the due diligence processes in carbon offset development projects today? And how is your product helping in that space, and why is it more scalable than what is currently being done?
Yeah, so our customers are primarily currently nature-based carbon project developers as well as financiers. And the current process is that they use a lot of consultants, and we learn a lot from these consultants as well. However, one thing that we learn is that a lot of these processes are still very manual. So with our customers starting to transition to using AI products like ourselves, we've seen our customers being able to evaluate a pre-feasibility for their nature-based projects up to 4 times faster than what is existing, which is typically a minimum of 8 weeks. We've been able to help our customers do that in less than 2. As well as I think thinking about the future with more satellites and more AI models being built out in this climate modeling space, we really see that scaling to even future where people can spend significantly less doing ground truthing to further reduce costs and increase efficiency in this space.
Amazing, yeah, putting AI to great use and with tangible results for sure. Inder, I know from our chats that you've been busy piloting your whole cleaning robot with a number of ships in Singapore lately. Can you talk a little bit about the prototyping and product development journey that brought your product to its current state, and what were some of the lessons learned?
Sure, I think a product development journey was mainly a 4-step process, like, that's rapid prototyping, testing, refining the designs, and repeating the process till we came to an acceptable version of the prototype. So once we had an acceptable version, I think we focused more on improving the cost to quality ratio of the product. That is, to bring our cost down at the same time, give a good quality product. And I think, some of the challenges or some of the lessons learned during this process would be like, as a bootstrap startup, you need to keep your initial cost really low, and you need to reach out to your network and get whatever free help which is possible, and you'll be surprised how willing your network is, going to help you. So I think, that had helped us in the development and our journey so far. Yes.
Amazing, thank you. And Sian, what were the opportunities that you guys initially saw in the predictive maintenance space that led you to create and scale GroundUp AI's product?
In terms of scaling the product? Actually, this entire idea came from our founder's own personal experience. Back then, they were running a blockchain server mining kind of business whereby clients depended on them to mine crypto 24/7. So they couldn't afford to let the servers go down for even a single minute, right? Because that meant a loss of revenue for the clients, and they had to be responsible for it. So they went through the very painful and very manual method of staying up to like 4 a.m. every night to make sure that none of the servers actually died on them. So after some time, they were completely burnt out, and they realized that it's not possible for them to do this every night, right? So that's when they developed the first version of the product to actually automate the entire process, monitor the servers on their behalf, identify any potential errors with the servers, and then they got back their proper sleep. Yeah. So subsequently, they found out that a lot of other asset owners faced the same problem as they did. So that's when they decided to really focus and scale the product.
That's amazing. I mean, a great example of creating a product to tackle an internal challenge and then realizing a bigger opportunity. John might know that this is a similar origin story to AWS, and we all know how far they've come. Nader, just throwing back to you, how do you see the reception of stakeholders in Singapore and beyond to the battery paper technology that you guys have, and how have you leveraged them to further scale the product?
Well, regarding the stakeholder, we already receive a huge demand for the products and services that people want to use our battery. And in addition, we also receive the order, people want to fabricate our battery, like thousands of battery per day, from the pupils that they want to test in their system. So that's the grid energy storage system, because currently we are focusing on that applications. And and following this, last few weeks ago, my CEO was in San Francisco, where he presented about our battery at Silicon Valley for test camps. And we are listed as one of the world's 20 most innovative startups in the entire world, and it's also one only Asian companies. So that shows the potentials we have and the work we are doing right now. So with the stakeholder, we're working with the people who can help us in design, manufacturing, and also in R&D. So currently, we are focusing on scaling and moving things faster so that we can get out there and start selling our batteries.
Yeah, congrats. I mean, the only Asian company at TechCrunch disrupt, that's a big deal, so congratulations. John, just throwing back to you, now that you have real customers using and stress testing your different products, what do you see as the next steps in Nika.eco's growth trajectory?
Yeah, so for us, I think in the AI space, it moves so quickly. I think the only advantage you really have as an AI software company is literally just how fast you build. So I think what we've been very fortunate to have is a lot of early traction in our 2 products. Our next steps is to really further build even more features and services that can further entrench further down the carbon project development cycle to further ensure that our customers use our product more and more. For instance, we are actually building out, in addition to the prediction models, actually allowing our customers to host and edit their data when they include further ground truthing data onto the platform so that the model further improves itself for better results to our customers over a longer period of time.
Awesome. Yep, moving fast is definitely important. Inder, maybe the last question for this panel. What is the potential impact of Alicia Bot's technology when it reaches the scale that you're aiming for?
Yeah, so as I said previously, that around 37 million metric ton is wasted each year. And our target is, within the next 5 years, we reach a level where we can get the emissions from this fuel reduced by at least 50%. And just like all other founders, I'm also an eternal optimist, and I go to work with the belief that we can get it down to 0 one day.
Definitely. Excited to follow your journey as well as all of the other startups. So I would like to thank all of our speakers and thank everyone in the audience for your patience and for sticking around. If you're interested in any of the teams that you heard about today, if you think you can help them or contribute to their growth in any way, please feel free to connect them today or on social media afterwards. So yeah, thank you everyone and have a great day.
Ladies and gentlemen, a big round of applause for all the speakers and panelists for the insightful presentation and discussion. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, this will bring us to the end of SIEW Energy Insights. The presentation slide will be accessible on SIEW website at siew.gov.sg. Please continue to join us this afternoon at the SIEW Tech Table. We have a very exciting lineup of the discussion on grid technology, energy storage system, digitalization, carbon capture and storage, and nuclear. You're also invited to join us at the SIEW Connects this evening at 5:30 onwards at the Bayfront foyer. Thank you, and we'll see you again at 2 p.m. here for the SIEW Tech Table.